Story 1. Caught girlfriend cheating with my friend. Got revenge by exposing his secret stash and getting him arrested. While she was away. Backstory. My girlfriend, Hannah, and I grew up in a large town with a population of nearly 20,000 people. We went to the same high school but had never met or talked to each other. We only began talking seriously a few years ago after college. I was offered a job that required a lot of traveling around the state. I requested an office in my hometown's branch because I wanted to conduct business not only in the state but also in my hometown. They also agreed because there was no business representative present in my hometown. After a few months, I settled into a routine of 1 to 2 weeks at the city office, 1 week in my hometown, and 1 to 2 weeks traveling around the rest of the country. After a year, I decided to buy a house in my hometown. I met Hannah at a party. It was a Friday. I had just returned from one of my trips and was checking in some paperwork at my office when Craig, the managing director and colleague, walked in. Craig and I had grown up together. It was a tight-knit town, but we had attended different high schools. Since returning from college, though, we had formed a close friendship. He asked how things were. Then he asked if I wanted to come to a house party that he and a group of buddies were throwing that evening. It was a little bit short notice, but I said yes because I felt like a few drinks with friends would be beneficial. It was at that party that Craig introduced me to Hannah. She was a new hire at the branch where my hometown's office was located and was getting to know everyone. Having attended the same high school, we hit it off immediately. Everything had gone really well. Hannah and my parents got along, and Hannah's parents also approved and were happy that someone could make Hannah as happy as she was. She had relationship issues in the past and went through a lot of depression. I won't bore you with too many details, but after 2 years of dating, we decided to take the next step, and she moved into my house in my hometown. Everything was going well for nearly a year. Then things began to change. FaceTime sessions were cut short, or she was too busy to answer the phone. Suddenly, neighbors would tell me about how a car, described to me like that of my friend Craig's, a black Chevrolet Camaro, was always seen parked in the back alley near my house whenever I was away, or some clothes that weren't mine were found in my wardrobe. All signs pointed to her cheating, but she said that nothing was happening and I was overthinking things. She said Craig would come over occasionally to discuss business, etc., but never stayed the night. I brushed it aside. I took it as me being paranoid and carried on as if nothing was wrong. But there was always this nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. I discovered she had been lying to me nearly 6 months later. I had just completed a rather large contract with a new company, and negotiations had concluded earlier than I had anticipated. So rather than staying for a few days, I decided to book an early flight home and surprise everyone. Fast forward a few hours, and I drive into my hometown and down the alley behind my house so that I could get into the house without being seen and surprise Hannah. Some part of me was curious, however, as to whether this mystery car was there. Sure enough, there was a car that was blocking the back entrance gate. I sat confused for a moment, wondering if it had just been a neglectful neighbor parking, only to realize that it was indeed Craig's car, a black Chevy Camaro. If it hadn't been for the high hedge line that I had put in a few years back for privacy, I might well have driven past my own place. Pulling up behind his car, I got out and thought it was strange that he was there so late, as she claimed that he always had left by now. As I approached the back of the house, I saw something that made my heart drop into my stomach. There, in my kitchen, Hannah and Craig were going at it hard. I froze and time stopped. There was my closest friend having sex on my dining table with my girlfriend in my goddamn house. I had no idea what to do. So many thoughts raced through my mind. Was I dreaming? Or was this real? Why were they having sex in my house? Dejected, I turned and left without them noticing. I drove for what seemed like an eternity in my car. I was crying hard, but the sadness quickly turned into anger. I really wanted to hurt them bad. However, I was someone who did not believe in violence. It was then that I realized I was going to punish them both and destroy their lives. And what better time to begin than now? I drove back up the alley, far enough away from my driveway that I could still see Craig's car, and then walked back to the gate where I could see into the house and called her phone. When it rang, they both looked at the caller ID, a look of shock on their faces as my name came up, and I saw that she was contemplating answering it. They allowed it to ring out for a few moments before they were back into it, and I dialed once again. This time, she did pick up the phone. As she was answering, I hung up and went back to my car. As soon as I did, she called me back and asked why I was calling so late. I told her I was about 15 minutes from home and didn't want to scare her when I was coming in. She was obviously surprised and acted happy that I was coming. The call ended very quickly after she said she was going to get up and get changed. I said bye and hung up. A few moments later, Craig came flying through the gate, half naked, jumped into his car, and took off like a bat out of hell. I laughed a little, knowing the fear that they both would be feeling from being so close to being caught. I waited a few moments before turning my car into the same place Craig had been moments earlier. The night was fairly uneventful afterward, and it wasn't until after she was asleep that I got up and went to my office down the hall. Couldn't sleep. I needed to plan the revenge. I did. My mother always taught me to be a pacifist and always let universal karma take its course, but on this particular occasion, I decided that karma could use a hand. I decided to punish them both separately but to destroy them both. I knew that Craig had a drug addiction but nothing major, but he kept it very private. I only knew about it after I accidentally barged in on him in his office and saw some coke, but pretended I hadn't seen it when he had made his attempts to cover it up. I was doing him a pretty good solid. Our office had a strict no substance abuse in the workplace policy. Some weeks later, I had friends over, including Craig, around for some drinks. After ensuring that Craig was sufficiently liquored up, I told him to stay the night and sleep it off. In the wee hours of the morning, I took his keys to his office and drove down to our branch office. I went to work, knowing he was drunk out of his mind and wouldn't be awake until the morning. I searched his desk and drawers, particularly the drawer where I had caught him stashing his coke. I examined it further and discovered it had a false base. Lifting up, I hit the jackpot. I thought he did regular drugs, coke and all that, but the stuff I saw in there was just downright awful. He had all types of stuff in there. I took photos and put everything back in place before leaving. I installed a small spy button camera I had gotten from Alibaba for a really good price right above the door. Everything was set and the plan was slowly coming together. Craig had to be using drugs at least twice a day, judging by the drugs I saw in his drawer. I had once suggested to my girlfriend that we install CCTV cameras around the house for added security, but she was hesitant because she had heard stories about cameras being hacked by scammers and blah blah blah. Now that I think about it, I can see why she was bothered by it. So, before returning to the city for a flight, I staged a break-in by smashing the back pane of my back door into my kitchen and leaving it open. I received several messages the moment I arrived. One from my clearly panicked mom, who was visiting and had found the back door smashed open and had called the police. One from a very shaken-up Hannah in tears, and one from the local police asking me to call. After returning all the calls, I informed the police I was away on business and that I would be back the following week to talk with them. While away, I got Hannah to stay with my parents until after I got back and asked my dad to organize one of the local security companies to install cameras and an alarm system after getting the go-ahead from the police so as to not ruin the scene of the crime. After getting home, I did the usual by God. I can't believe this has happened and why would anyone do this routine? After doing a thorough check, I had the security company's representative walk Hannah and I through how the cameras and alarm system worked. And then came the question I had been waiting for. What happens if we do some business and don't want it recorded? She asked this question. She pretended to be shy, but I knew exactly the reason she was asking. He assured us that this was a question he got asked a lot and we were shown on the home computer if we wanted to be doing things without it being recorded how to stop the recording for certain cameras so that we could protect her modesty. As I was walking him out, I asked if the cameras were turned off, could a notification be sent out just as a security precaution. He came back in and helped me through how to set up email notifications and left shortly after. In addition, after Hannah had gone grocery shopping, I installed the spy button cameras all over the house. It was fantastic. All I had to do was wait at this point. I approached some legal advice groups on here for some help in relation to a couple's law in my country. I needed to make sure that my upcoming plan could be legally carried out and that I would not be forced to pay out any money or equity to Hannah, as I didn't know if we were classified as a de facto couple or not. I didn't want to be left with any nasty surprises where Hannah would take money from me or anything. Shout out to those guys and gals here on Reddit that helped me get in contact with a great lawyer who assured me due to the fact that although we had been dating for close to 4.5 years, we had not been living together long enough to be classified as de facto, and the fact that I was paying all of the utilities on the property she was living in and not paying rent demonstrated that she had no legal standing to make a financial claim against me. Just to be sure, he drafted up what I thought was a pretty solid legal document just in case anything went wrong legally. More good news. My boss approached me the following week and offered me a promotion to return to the city and lead the team that I was a part of, which meant I wouldn't have to travel as much and be in the one location, and due to the success of my hometown's office, that they were considering having 5 to 7 representatives spend 1 to 2 weeks in the larger surrounding towns, including my hometown, as part of my team. I said yes and began the process of initiating my transfer, which would take about 6 weeks. It was perfect. More than enough time to gather all my evidence. Upon getting back to my hometown the following week, I began to start and map out the rest of my plan. I asked Craig to do me a solid and approve 1 week's worth of vacation for Hannah for 2 weeks. I wanted to send her and a friend or two away on a short break. He agreed. He jumped up and gave me a huge hug before I made the most significant decision of my life for the second time, congratulating me on being ready to retake the leap. I hugged him back tight, but not the way I think he imagined it at the time. He agreed and blocked out the week also for me. I asked him not to say anything to anyone, as I wanted to make it as big a surprise as I could. I knew that it would spread like wildfire around the office regardless. That was my plan. That night, I told Hannah that I had booked her and 2 friends to go to a tropical spa resort. All expenses paid for a week. No questions asked. Pick 2 friends and come back to the biggest surprise of her life to have. I then told her that the following week I was going to spend it in the city preparing for a very important client, who was one of my biggest accounts and needed some people in my team to help before flying out the following week. And I wouldn't be home until the Monday that she was leaving, so I wouldn't be able to see her, which seemed to disappoint her a little, but I told her it would be worth it when she returned. What I failed to say to her was that I had decided to take 2 weeks vacation on the other side of the country, mentally preparing myself for the shitstorm that was about to break out the moment she stepped foot on the plane, as well as enjoying my first stage of freedom. On Sunday, 2 weeks later, I flew back and began driving home. Once getting there, I did a quick pass by my house, and sure enough, Craig's car was there, like the first night I had caught them. I parked a little ways back and checked the CCTV cameras. They were all live, but I couldn't find them anywhere. I switched to the spy cameras, and then with the camera I hid in the side lamp, I found them going at it in my bedroom. We hadn't installed any CCTV in our bedroom, so she probably felt they were safe there on our bed. No surprise, honestly, as I had recorded them constantly doing this over the 2 weeks I had been away. I then made my first call to the police, blocking my caller ID. I told them that I was one of my neighbors and saw someone hanging around in their car in the alley behind my house and occasionally passing something through windows to passing cars while also looking into my yard, and I was concerned that they were dealing drugs. I gave them the license plate and description for Craig's car and told them I suspected him, Craig, to be the drug dealer. They said they would have someone there in a few minutes, so I thanked them and hung up. Then, using a new email I had just opened, I sent all the videos from the spy cam of Craig in his office doing drugs and also the photos of the other night I ransacked his desk to his boss. I then called Hannah and told her I was about 10 minutes from home and that I knew she was flying out tomorrow but desperately wanted to surprise her. Looking back at the footage now, I laugh at the commotion that I caused and I'm surprised I didn't hear any sounds. In a few short seconds, there came out Craig, who was dressed and flying out into the back door to his car. I couldn't have asked for a more perfect scene. As Craig was peeling away, one of the police cars rounded the corner behind me, saw Craig driving away fast, and gave chase. After pulling in, greeting an excited Hannah and doing all the couple things, she fell asleep again. I, on the other hand, couldn't sleep a wink. The next day, she and her friends were bundled into a car. After they drove away, I had to wait a few hours, but I began to execute my plan. I called my friend who was a removalist and apologized for the late notice, but I needed my place packed and moved on Friday. After agreeing on a time, I told him that he would need to take certain boxes to a storage facility, which he said wasn't an issue. Then I began packing Hannah's belongings. Later that day, I got a call from the police for me to identify if I knew Craig and if I suspected him of any suspicious activities or doing drugs. Our town was hard on drug law and enforcement or drug dealing. I expressed pretend shock and replied, "No." It turned out they had apprehended from the suspect of the previous night a lot of hard and illegal drugs in his vehicle. I grinned to myself that my plan for Craig had grown to fruition. By this stage, the town was buzzing with news. Events in my hometown don't stay secret long. Craig was disgraced and promptly fired for his possession of drugs. That night, I went to my parents' house and told them and Hannah's parents also what had happened, admitting certain details and that I was moving back to the city after being promoted, but Hannah wouldn't be a part of it. They were pretty upset initially that I hadn't let them know what was going on, but were happy that I was handling everything maturely and hadn't sunk to their level, though they didn't agree with ghosting Hannah. But after some drinks, laughs, and tears, I went home. On Friday afternoon, after a busy week of organizing cleaners for the following week, the real estate agent to put my house on the rental market and did various other tasks at my hometown's office, I packed some things into my car and drove to my parents' place and said goodbye before the drive. Before leaving, I went to Catherine's house. Catherine had been one of Hannah's closest friends growing up. She was the only other person who knew what was happening, the details about Craig. Without her help, I probably wouldn't have been able to organize everything as quickly as I had. I gave Catherine a large manila folder with my gathered evidence of her cheating, as well as a letter and a few other legal documents from my attorney, stating that she was ordered not to contact me and the details of how to access her belongings located at the storage unit I had rented out. After a quick goodbye, I left and drove back to the city. On Sunday, I woke up to several missed calls, voice messages, and text messages. Turns out, Hannah had come home early after being alerted to something being afoot in town, only to find an empty house and a "for rent" sign out the front. Freaking out, she had gone to my parents, who closed the door on her the moment that they answered, forcing her to call everyone until she managed to somehow be contacted by Catherine and told that she had a package for her. I was told that she didn't take too well to that, as I fully well knew at that point from the numerous angry texts and voice messages from her accusing me of setting up Craig, of being deceitful, etc., etc. I was afraid she'd show up at my front door, but nothing happened. 6 weeks later, after leaving and being promoted, I'm happy and settled now. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My wife used to love me for being me, but after her big promotion, she started wanting luxury and calling me a poor idiot. Now she's handed me divorce papers and says she deserves better. I never thought I'd be the one writing here, but I need to get this off my chest and maybe get some advice from people who've been through similar things. This is a long story, so bear with me. I've been married to Ella for 10 years. We met in college, and it was one of those quick connections. One day we were talking about the stars in the sky, and the next day we were going on our first date. I was a simple guy with big dreams but no definite plans for what I wanted to do in the future. But I knew that I didn't want to be a loser. Ella, on the other hand, was always ambitious. She was studying business, always had a clear path in mind, and seemed to have her entire future mapped out. Despite our differences, we clicked. She loved my easygoing nature and my ability to find joy in the little things. We balanced each other out perfectly. I didn't need to go out of my way to impress her or bring costly gifts to keep her smiling. I'd give her a rose and she'd keep it safe until the petals fell off, sometimes even after that. After graduation, I took a job as a middle school teacher. It wasn't high-paying, but I loved it. I enjoyed working with kids and it gave me a sense of joy. I felt that teaching the young ones every day was a different kind of thrill and adventure. There is so much to learn from them. Ella started working for a big corporation, quickly climbing the corporate ladder. She always supported my career choice, or at least I thought she did. She often told me how much she appreciated my passion for teaching and how it made her feel secure to know that I was making a difference in young lives. She was my inspiration. If she sets a goal, she doesn't rest until she achieves it. For the first few years, things were great. We lived in a small apartment, saved money where we could, and made the most of our time together. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that seemed to be enough. We would spend our weekends hiking, cooking together, or just lying on the couch with a good book or watching a movie. Life was simple and beautiful. As Ella's career began to take off, I couldn't have been prouder. Seeing her hard work and dedication pay off was a very happy feeling for me. I remember the day she got her first big promotion. I came back from school and sat down with a bowl of popcorn when she burst through the door. Her face lit up with excitement. She'd been promoted to a management position at her company, and it came with a very good raise. We celebrated that night by turning the TV volume up, dancing to Lady Gaga, and downing the vodka she bought on her way back home. We were so drunk that we couldn't find the way to our bedroom and slept on the carpet in the living room. The next day our heads were aching, but the happiness of her achievement brought a smile to our faces. I even planned a date for us that weekend. We packed a picnic basket with homemade sandwiches, fresh fruit, and a bottle of her favorite wine. We drove out to a nearby park, a beautiful place with wide open spaces, tall trees, and a lake. We found a quiet spot under a large oak tree, spread out a blanket, and settled down for our picnic. We spoke about the day we met, our first date, and how far we have come. We spoke about our family, my future plans, and the kids at my school. I also wanted to mention to her that we must think about children of our own, but I stopped myself. It's her moment. I didn't want to bring up the topic of a family when I was not sure if she was ready for it yet. That day was perfect. It was simple, cost almost nothing, and yet it was filled with genuine happiness. Ella seemed to enjoy it too. She told me how much she appreciated the effort I put into planning our day and how it reminded her of why she fell in love with me. But things started to change about a year ago. Ella came back home and told me that her colleague was going on vacation to a very costly holiday destination. I nodded and went back to giving my students scores on their assessment papers. She asked if we could also go on vacation, and I said, yes. Why not? Right? We booked our tickets and stays. She paid for all of it. I thought I'd spend on our food and other expenses during the trip, but I was very shocked by the kind of things she wanted because it was so unlike her. She wished to dine in very costly restaurants, hire an expensive car to go sightseeing, party every night in clubs, and book luxury massages and spas. I paid for everything. A lady deserves the best holiday. If my wife wants it, I give it to her. It was a one-time thing anyway. When we got back from our vacation, Ella was the happiest I had ever seen her. She was very joyful for almost a month after that. But then she came to me and asked to go on another vacation. Firstly, I won't get a leave of absence at such short notice. I was gone for a week only a month ago. Also, I didn't have enough money to fund the trip. She wanted to go to Paris. That's very far away. And I also had to think about my students' examinations. I had to complete teaching them the syllabus before the deadline. I respectfully told her that we should plan at some other time. She didn't argue and let it go. But as time went on, things began to change. Ella's desire for a better lifestyle grew. She started talking about moving to an even bigger apartment and buying home decor items that we did not need. She suddenly wanted a walk-in wardrobe. She started spending her money on expensive shoes, and I also gave her money to buy these satin sheets that were too overpriced. I couldn't help but feel a growing disconnect. I say so because she no longer wanted to go on simple dates. We stopped our picnics, no longer had burgers at a food joint that we loved because someone told her it was very unhygienic and cheap. She didn't buy wine anymore and shifted to champagne. We did not cook together in the kitchen and ordered takeaway. She started sitting by her computer and having meals, always texting these new friends that I had never heard about. I thought it was a phase, but I felt very bad that we were not spending enough time with each other. One day, I asked her if she would go out with me. I wanted to go to this Asian food place that sold the best ramen and kimchi. I am a fan of the food. She immediately said no and argued that these places were not to her liking anymore and that I should stop visiting such lowly places. I told her there is nothing lowly about food. She added that I often started conversing with the waiters or restaurant owners there, and it was very embarrassing to her. She never felt embarrassed before. In fact, she'd join in the conversations and laugh around with them. I did not argue and asked her if she wanted to go somewhere else then. She said that there was an office party the weekend and I should attend it with her. I agreed, but that night we stayed in silence and said nothing to each other. Suddenly, we were attending high-end social events, networking parties, and dinners at expensive restaurants. Ella is a totally different person in these places. She's always engaging and charming, but I often felt out of place. I missed the simplicity of our old life, the ease and comfort of just being ourselves. I missed the road trips, the camping under the stars, and the fun exploration of local attractions. We hardly spoke about things that we loved. All she was interested in was that branded bag that her boss bought, the necklace her colleague's husband gifted her, or how these kids of her friend were going to school with very high fees. During one of our conversations, she said that I should start thinking about my life and do something about it. In my opinion, I was doing just fine. I am happy where I am. When I said the same to her, she said if the kids were paying such high fees in those schools, the teachers would be paid well too. I should consider working in such places. I am very attached to my present workplace. I love my colleagues, the kids, the atmosphere, and I will never trade it for anything else. I received my share of promotions while I am at it, though they are very different from hers. I told her I didn't plan to change and she lost her temper. We got into a very heated argument. That's when she said, "I did not marry you to remain a poor idiot." She said that we had the means to do so much more, to live better. Why wouldn't I want that? She asked. Yes, I would want to live better. I want to earn more money and show the world to her. But lately all she cared about was money and the temporary happiness that it offers. I wish to grow in my career, to be successful, in contentment. She wanted to do it to fill her bank balance and spend it as if she had no care in the world. After the promotion, she started spending time with a crowd that was nothing but showy. They do not understand the beauty of small joys in life. I tried to tell her that, but she became very defensive and said that I cannot achieve anything in my life because I am not ready to leave my poor victim mentality behind. She asked me not to control her. I let it go. I was merely suggesting. I never thought I was poor or that I was a victim. I don't know why she even said that. I struggled to explain that my contentment wasn't about settling for less, but about finding joy in what we had. I loved our simple life, our home-cooked meals, our quiet nights in. Yes, I want to go out to eat in restaurants. I want to travel the world with her and I want to gift her anything that she wants. But my life shouldn't revolve around these things only. They are not the memories that we will remember when we are 90. I didn't need luxury to be happy, but Ella seemed unable to understand this, and her dissatisfaction with our life grew. One night, after another fight, I decided to plan another simple date. I thought she'd feel better and things between us will finally seem normal. I suggested we have a movie night at home, just the two of us. I cooked her favorite dinner, set up the living room with cozy blankets and pillows, and picked out a few of our favorite movies from college. For a moment, it seemed to work. Ella relaxed and we enjoyed the evening together, laughing and playing board games. But as soon as the night was over, reality came crashing back. The next day she was back to the usual complaining about the things we didn't have in the life she felt we were missing out on. I made the mistake of mentioning that I was looking forward to starting a family and we shouldn't fight with each other the way we were. She laughed at my face and said that I could never afford children. I should just be happy with the ones I see at school. I thought she'd said it out of anger and would apologize to me later, but she never did and I never asked. I let it go. It became clear that our lives were moving in different directions. Ella's career was her priority, and she was driven by the desire for more. More money, more status, more luxury. My priorities hadn't changed. I still found joy in the simple things and in the fulfillment my job brought me. I don't want to run behind money for the reasons that she wants to. I tried to support Ella and her ambitions, but it felt like no matter what I did, it was never enough. She wanted me to be more, to want more, but I couldn't change who I was. She wanted me to ditch t-shirts for suits, shirts for tuxedos, and Crocs for shiny shoes, and I did not want any of that. The love that once brought us together now seemed to be the very thing driving us apart. I started questioning myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was being selfish by sticking to my low-paying job, by not striving for more. I considered going back to school, trying to find a higher-paying job, anything to make her happy. I wanted to tell her the same thing once I got back home, but then I heard her speaking with her sister on the phone. She told her that she made a mistake marrying someone like me who enjoyed being poor. I liked lending money to everyone and treated her like you were a beggar. She has no freedom in the house and feels like a maid every day. She can't even bring a bottle of champagne to the house without me looking at her like she doesn't deserve it. Compared to the husbands of her other colleagues, I was a loser who knew nothing about my life. She also said that I had always been irresponsible in life and her love made her very blind to these flaws. She made a huge mistake settling with someone who could never earn good money. She also said how her sister's husband was way better than me and I should learn a thing or two from him. She laughed at how I asked her for kids. She told her sister that her kids could never have a father like me who'd struggle to get them their favorite toys. She made me sound like someone who had zero bank balance, a loser with no purpose, an idiot who knew nothing about keeping a family together. When she saw me, she quickly hung up, but the damage was done. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That night, I told her I couldn't take it anymore. I asked her if she still loved me or if she loved the idea of what I could be. She didn't answer right away, and the silence was in itself an answer. Finally, she said, "I do love you, but I hate our life. I want more, and I thought you did too." I told her that I loved our life, or at least the life we used to have. I asked her if she could still love me if I didn't change, if I stayed the same easygoing guy she fell in love with. She didn't answer, and I knew then that our marriage was in serious trouble. We can't even look at each other anymore. If she sees me in the room, she finds somewhere else to be. If I am taking a glass of water from the kitchen, she turns around and disappears. She comes home really late and sleeps on the couch. I feel like the bad guy, and it's too much for me to take. I tried to hold her hand while we were stepping out of the house yesterday, and she quickly pulled away with a disgusted face. I don't know what I did to earn such a response from her. So here's what I think. I am planning to tell her that we should take a break and think about where our relationship is heading. Will that be too harsh on her? Well, right now everything is harsh on me. It is very difficult to see the love of my life treat me like a pest or something. What do you think I must be doing? Update 1. First off, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who offered their love and support after my last post. I appreciate every single comment and message. I've been reading through them, and it's helped me feel less alone during this incredibly difficult time. I wanted to give you all an update on what's been happening since then. We decided to take a break. She moved in with her sister and I stayed in our apartment. The silence that followed was both a relief and a torture. On one hand, I missed her terribly, the woman I fell in love with. On the other hand, I didn't miss the constant insults and taunts about my job and my lifestyle. During this break, I had a lot of time to think about my life choices. I reflected on why I chose to become a teacher in the first place, and I reaffirmed my love for the profession. I realized that while I wanted to support Ella and make her happy, I couldn't change who I was. Doing so would mean cheating myself and giving up a part of me. That being said, I also understood that compromise is part of any relationship. So I started looking into opportunities that would allow me to advance in my career. I found a position at a better school, one that offers more responsibilities and the chance to make a broader impact. The pay wouldn't be much different, but the role excited me. I felt it would be a positive step forward and something that could potentially address some of Ella's concerns without forcing me to completely be the person I am not. I was ready to go tell Ella about my decision after our 2-month break. I thought that perhaps this compromise might be a way to bridge the gap between us. But before I could reach out to her, she showed up at our apartment with divorce papers. She explained that she couldn't be with a man who couldn't fulfill her desires and wishes. She told me she felt like I couldn't achieve anything in life and that she deserved more than what I could offer. She mentioned her social circles and how they would frown upon a person like me. She didn't want her partner to be someone she wasn't proud of, and in her eyes, that's what I had become. I realized that no matter what I did, it might never be enough to satisfy her desire for more. I took the divorce papers and told her I needed time to think about it. I wasn't ready to make any decisions on the spot. After she left, I sat down and thought about our entire relationship, from the early days of our love to the recent years of growing apart. It was clear that we had both changed, and while I still loved her deeply, I couldn't ignore the fact that we were no longer compatible. She was here 2 days ago. I plan on discussing things with my parents and then let her know about my decision. Now her thoughts seem more like an insult to me than anything else. Some would even call it toxic. I will come back with an update soon. Thank you so much, everyone. Update 2. Hey Reddit. I am extremely sorry. I totally forgot to tell you what's happening with me. There were so many disturbances that I hardly had time to breathe. So here's the thing, our divorce got finalized. Firstly, I want to thank each and every one of you for your unwavering support throughout this challenging time. Your messages and encouragement have truly been a lifeline for me, and I can't express how much it means to have this community behind me. After the divorce was finalized, I took some time to process everything and figure out my next steps. One of the biggest changes I made was in my career. I decided to take a leap and change jobs to pursue a position at a better school. I chased opportunities instead of money, and it's the best decision I made. It feels like I've left my comfort zone, and the result is even better. On a more personal note, I also made a furry addition to my life. Snooper, my German Shepherd companion. Getting a dog has been such a joy. Snooper is always eager to go on adventures with me. He makes me feel less alone, and I look forward to coming back to my house so that I can spend time with him. I've also been considering counseling. I kind of understand the importance of professional support in processing everything I've been through. My friends and family have been incredibly supportive of this decision, and they also encouraged me to work on my mental health first. A sound mind means a sound body. This was what my mother told me. I thought they'd be shocked that I was planning to go to a shrink, but no one batted an eyelash. I was the one overthinking for no reason. Regarding the divorce, Ella and I no longer have any contact. After the divorce was finalized, she came by to collect her belongings and completely removed her presence from our shared space. I am being honest, she didn't even leave a tissue behind. I didn't say a word to her or her sister while they packed her things and left. I have no hard feelings against her. She will always remain one of my most beautiful memories. But I can't say the same about her. While Ella was packing her things, her sister came to me and whispered in my ear that Ella hated me more than anything else and that the biggest mistake of her life was to marry me. I smiled and said nothing. There's nothing to say, is there? I'm focusing on healing and moving forward. I tried calling her a few times in the beginning just to ask how she was doing. Her answers were short and irritated. Then I understood that my presence in her life was not welcome, not even for phone calls. I quit calling her. She blocked my number after a few days. I learned from mutual friends that she was seeing someone from her office. I am really happy for her. She deserves all the happiness in the world. My mother wants me to start dating again, but I think it's too soon. She introduced me to this really nice girl from her cooking classes. She is an athlete. Her name is Mia. Yes, I liked her company, but I must see how things will turn out. I don't want to rush into anything now. Once again, thank you so much for all your love and support. I am doing great and will continue to focus on myself, better myself, and achieve the best things in life. Lots of love and joy to all of you. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My stepson kept calling me a gold digger, even when I am the one who is supporting his father and paying for everything. I, 42F, have been married to my husband Henry, 45M, for 4 years. He has a 19-year-old son, Levi, from a previous marriage. When Henry and I first got together, he was going through an extremely difficult time after unexpectedly losing his job of 15 years. His confidence and self-worth were pretty low, and his meager savings had been wrecked by a long, messy divorce from Levi's mother. I couldn't bear to watch the man I loved suffering so much. After only a brief discussion, I insisted Henry move into my house so he could get back on his feet without the stress of rent. I helped pay off the mountain of debts he had accrued, bought him a used but reliable car so he could get to job interviews, and made certain he never once missed a child support payment to Levi's mom when Levi lived with her. It wasn't a handout but an investment in building a future together as partners. Even after Henry eventually found steady work again, I continued paying the lion's share of our living expenses since I had a lucrative career as a senior marketing executive. I never once resented Henry for this arrangement. We were a team in my eyes, and I knew he deeply appreciated all I did to keep us afloat during those tough years. Henry was a proud man, someone who believed strongly in being a provider, but he swallowed that pride and accepted my help so we could build a strong relationship and maintain stability for Levi. However, his teenage son, Levi, took an immediate, intense disliking to me from the moment I entered their lives. He fiercely resented my presence when he was already angry and feeling displaced after his parents' divorce. At 15, Levi was in the throes of adolescent angst and anger and desperately needed a target for those roiling emotions. I became that target, the home wrecker he accused of trying to replace his saintly mother and the gold digger he was convinced had trapped his father in her clutches. It wasn't that bad at first because he only came over during the weekends. But when Levi turned 17, his mother moved to Jamaica to live with her family there, and Levi totally refused to go with her. He had a distorted view of African countries despite being half African. Henry didn't seem to mind, agreeing that his son couldn't possibly live in the backwaters of Jamaica. When Levi first moved in, I tried to show him the beauty of his culture in Jamaica. Google was free. Henry's foolishness and encouraging his dislike for his home country disgusted me, but Levi took my interest in showing him information about Jamaica as an attempt to get him to leave. I swear it was not. After a major argument where he threw our boiling hot dinner in my face, I stopped, refusing to mention Jamaica or his mother anymore. As the years passed, no matter how hard I tried to forge a connection with my new stepson, Levi violently rejected every olive branch. I learned to cook all his favorite comfort meals, showed up to cheer myself hoarse from the bleachers at his basketball games, and spent countless patient hours helping him navigate the college application process. But he just pushed me away harder with each attempt. "You're not my damn mom. You're just the gold digger spending my dad's money." Levi would sneer at me cruelly, ignoring the fact that his father was only scraping by because of my steady paycheck. Henry hated any sort of conflict, and while he certainly didn't approve of Levi's blatant disrespect, his tiny attempts at discipline was a, "Hey now, Levi, be nice to your stepmom." As you can guess, it did little to curb his son's vicious behavior. I think any criticism of Levi that I brought up felt like rubbing salt in the wound of Henry's own perceived failure of being a terrible provider for his child. So I picked my battles carefully, biting my tongue until it bled to keep a fragile peace even as Levi's put-downs grew worse. When Levi turned 18 and finished high school, I thought it was time he started paying some type of rent if he wanted to continue living at home, to be clear, my home. His father agreed, and we charged him a pittance compared to market rates for our area. We hoped taking on the small responsibility would help Levi start maturing into an adult. Instead, our request was met with a temper tantrum, as Levi insisted it was my house, so I should be covering all his expenses to stay with his dad. To be fair, he worked a few hours a week at a part-time minimum wage job but blew every cent of his tiny paycheck on the latest video games and weed. After several long months of Levi shirking even the most basic household chores, skipping out on his cheap rent, coming home at all hours reeking of pot, and hurling a constant litany of insults my way, I was truly at my wit's end. But his disrespect to me reached a new, unimaginable height last Tuesday. I was frantically scrambling to get ready and out the door for the biggest meeting of my career. A critical pitch to land a massive new client that my marketing firm had been looking into for months. I needed to get to the office at least an hour early to prepare my presentation. Rushing out to my car, my stomach dropped through the floor when I saw my normally spotless vehicle completely covered in smashed eggs and dripping rolls of toilet paper. Across the windshield, "Gold Digger" was scrawled in shaving cream. Then, as I drew closer in horrified disbelief, I noticed that all 4 of my tires had been slashed. Levi stood off to the side with his arms smugly folded, openly smirking at his vile handiwork. I saw nothing but red. Years' worth of repressed resentment came flooding out of me in an uncontrollable torrent of screams and anger. I tore into Levi, calling him every variation of an ungrateful, lazy, spoiled brat that my mind could make. I raged at the sheer audacity of him constantly disrespecting me when I worked myself to the bone to fund his freeloading lifestyle and keep a roof over his father's head. I was absolutely done walking on eggshells in my own home, and it was high time for him to grow the hell up and join the real world. I gave him 30 days to find himself a new place to live, telling him that I am not his personal ATM anymore and I'm sure as hell finished putting up with being disrespected and degraded in the house I pay for. I gave him the ultimatum while shaking with blinding rage before storming back inside to frantically call a cab to get me to my meeting. By the time I managed to clean myself up and rush to my meeting, I was nearly 30 minutes late and still completely out of it. My pitch was mediocre at best, and the clients just stared at me with cold skepticism. I left the meeting unsure if I had managed to salvage the deal. Back at home, Henry tried to talk me down, insisting that while Levi's vindictive vandalism was totally uncalled for, I had flown off the handle and gone way too far in my reaction. He pleaded with me to be the bigger person, reminding me that this was still Levi's home too and we couldn't just throw him to the curb. Deep down, I knew Henry was terrified of pushing his son away for good, but I held firm to my position. I was utterly done tolerating such blatant abuse and disrespect from Levi. I told Henry his son needed to face real adult consequences for his actions or he'd never learn. Henry then told me that if I kick his son out, he'll leave with him. It devastated me that my husband refused to present a united front or understand that I was being bullied in my own home by his son. Henry refused to sleep in the same bed with me that night, and it broke me. I am convinced I have just destroyed my marriage by drawing such a hard line, but I can't see any other choice. So, Reddit, it's okay to be harsh. Just let me know. Am I really the villain here? Update 1. Wow, I didn't expect this to blow up like it did. Thank you to everyone who took the time to read and comment, even if we didn't always agree. I figured I'd post an update to clear some things up and give more context. A lot of you asked about our financial situation. To be clear, the house is 100% in my name. I bought it before I even met Henry. The car I got him is also in my name, but I don't even care about that. He needs it more than I do. As for our bills, I've been paying the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and Levi's expenses like clothes and school stuff. Henry chips in when he can, but it doesn't even cover half the costs. I've never thrown it in his face, though, because that's just not me. Some of you said I should have set firmer boundaries with Levi from the start. You're probably right. I guess I just wanted him to like me so bad that I let too much slide. I didn't want to overstep since I'm not his real mom. You know? But I see now that I should have demanded basic respect from day one. A few people asked why Henry can't get a better paying job. The truth is he's always struggled with work, even before we met. He has some health issues that make it hard for him to do manual labor, and he never finished college. But he's a good man and a hard worker when he's given a chance. I just wish he'd stand up for me more. Oh, and for those saying I should just kick Levi out already. Trust me, I've been tempted, but he's still Henry's son, and I could never put that wedge in their relationship. My hope was always that we could work through this as a family. Reading all your responses made me realize this situation is even more messed up than I thought. I've been so focused on keeping the peace that I've let myself become a punching bag. That ends now. I'm going to have a serious talk with Henry tonight. Either he backs me up in setting clear rules and expectations for Levi, or I'm done being disrespected in my own home. Wish me luck. I'll keep you posted. Update 2. Hey everyone. I'm back with another update. I wish I had better news. I sat down with Henry like I said I would. I laid it all out. How Levi's behavior was totally unacceptable, how I couldn't keep living like this, and how I needed his support in setting boundaries. First, he seemed to get it. He agreed that Levi had crossed a line and promised to talk to him. But then Levi got home, and the conversation went sideways fast. He started in on his usual crap about how I'm not his mom, how I'm ruining his life, yada yada. I kept my cool and firmly told him his options. Either shape up and start contributing to the household or find somewhere else to live. Well, apparently that was the wrong thing to say. Levi lost it, saying he couldn't believe his dad was letting some gold digger kick him out of his own house. I looked to Henry, expecting him to take my side like we agreed, and that spineless man just sat there staring at the floor. I snapped. I told Levi it was my house, my rules, and if he didn't like it, there was the door. He stormed out, screaming about how he was leaving and never coming back, and we'd regret this. Good riddance. But it wasn't over. Henry laid into me, saying I had no right to kick out his son, that I was tearing apart his family. I reminded him that I was his family too, or supposed to be. He said he couldn't deal with this right now and left. I don't know what to do. Still, I'll keep you guys updated. Update 3. So, My last update was 2 days ago. Henry has been crashing at a friend's, ignoring my texts. Meanwhile, Levi's been blowing up his phone, playing the victim. I feel like I'm at my wit's end. There's a part of me that just wants to give in, to swallow my pride and beg them to come back home. I long for things to go back to how they were, even if it means keeping my head down and my mouth shut just to maintain this illusion of a happy family. But there's something I haven't shared with you all. Something I've kept hidden out of fear and embarrassment. You see, I have POS, polycystic ovary syndrome. It's a condition that affects so many aspects of my life, but most importantly, it makes conceiving a child naturally a real challenge. I've always dreamed of being a mother, of holding a little piece of myself in my arms. But with each passing year and negative pregnancy test, that dream has felt more and more out of reach. When Henry brought Levi into my life, it was like a beacon of hope in my struggle with infertility. Here was this beautiful, intelligent boy who needed a mother's love. I guess a part of me clung to him as my chance at motherhood, even if he didn't share my blood. I poured all the love and nurturing I had into him, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he could fill that aching void in my heart. I was afraid that if people knew about my condition, they would side with Henry, see me as less of a woman or less worthy of being a parent. I worried they'd think I was using Levi as a substitute for the child I couldn't have on my own. But the truth is, my love for Levi was never a replacement or a consolation prize. It was real, fierce, and unconditional, the way a mother's love should be. Even now, after all the heartache and disrespect, those maternal feelings haven't wavered. When I tell you I love Levi like my own, I mean it with every fiber of my being. Letting him go, drawing these boundaries, it feels like I'm ripping out a part of myself. The thought of losing him, of losing this chance at being a mom, is almost too much to bear. But I also know that I can't keep living like this, can't keep sacrificing my own well-being and self-respect for the scraps of affection they toss my way. POS may have made my path to motherhood more difficult, but it doesn't make me any less deserving of love and respect from my partner and my would-be child. So, as much as it hurts, as much as I want to cling to this dream of a family I've built in my head, I know I need to stand my ground. For my own sake and for the sake of any future children I may have, whether they come from my own body or through the boundless love in my heart. I need to show them that it's okay to demand respect, to set boundaries, and to walk away from those who can't give us the love we deserve. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever get to be a mom or if Henry and Levi will ever truly see and appreciate all I've given them. And a bigger part of me is just damn tired. Tired of being taken for granted, disrespected, and treated like an outsider in my own life. So now I'm sitting here alone in the house I paid for, wondering where to go from here. I know I was hard on Levi, but what choice did I have? I love Henry, but I'm losing respect for him by the minute. Why am I fighting so hard for people who clearly don't give a damn about me? I don't know what the future holds. All I know is I deserve better than this. I deserve peace in my own home. I deserve a partner who stands by me. I'm done setting myself on fire to keep others warm. Thank you for letting me vent and for all the tough love and support. I'll post a final update when I figure out my next steps. I know it's going to be hard, but I have to start putting myself first. They're welcome back if they can get with the program, but I will no longer set myself on fire to keep them warm. Update 4. Well, it's been a hell of a ride. First off, I want to say how much all of your comments and messages have meant to me, even the tough ones. You've given me a lot to think about. It's been a few weeks since everything blew up. Henry stayed away for about a week, ignoring my attempts to reach out. I was starting to think it was really over. But then he showed up at the door, tired and sheepish. We had a long, brutal talk, probably the most honest we've ever been with each other. He admitted that he'd been avoiding confronting Levi because he was afraid of losing him, like he lost his ex, and knowing it's hard for me to conceive, Levi could end up being his only child. But he said seeing me standing up for myself made him realize how much he had to lose with me too. I told him I was done being the bad guy, done being disrespected and unappreciated. If we were going to make this work, things had to change. He agreed. As for Levi, he's still staying with friends. Henry laid down the law. If he wants to come back, He needs to get a job, pay rent, and treat me with basic human decency. No more freeloading or temper tantrums. We'll see if he steps up. I'm not gonna lie, it still hurts. I poured my heart into this family, and a lot of days it feels like it was all for nothing. I know I can't change the past. All I can do is move forward with clearer boundaries and a stronger sense of self-worth. Henry and I are taking things day by day, rebuilding trust and figuring out what our new normal looks like. It's not perfect, but we're trying. He's picking up extra shifts and has started chipping in more around the house. Baby steps. Talking about babies, I haven't been feeling too well even prior to the entire issue, so I took a pregnancy test 2 days ago, those drugstore types, and it was positive. So yay. Henry is excited, but I told him to pipe down. Those tests are wrong sometimes. I don't know if the hesitation is for me or for him. He has scheduled a doctor's appointment for next week. Part of me doesn't want to go. What if the test comes out negative and I got our hopes up for nothing? Henry understands and he's not pushing me to take the test, so I'm grateful for that. But I told him not to cancel the appointment while I try to build up courage to go for the test. Right now, to keep my mind off it, I'm focusing on my own happiness for once. I've taken up yoga to calm my mind. It's not helping, to be honest, but still I have to wait. I think I'll ask Henry to push the test back by a week. I don't know. I'm just scared. But still, I guess what I've learned from all this is that you can't pour from an empty cup and that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's survival. I gave and gave until I had nothing left for myself. Never again. So that's where I'm at. Still very much a work in progress. But aren't we all? Of course, I know some of you will say I'm a chump for giving Henry another chance, and maybe I am. But I've got to do what feels right for me. I still love him, flaws and all. As long as I don't lose myself again, I think we've got a shot. Update 5. Hey everyone, it's me again. I know it's been a while since my last update, a month as a matter of fact, but a lot has happened in the past month, and I want to fill you all in. First off, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all your support and advice through this whole crazy situation. So where do I even start? I guess with the biggest news. As I already hinted at, I took a blood test to confirm it and I'm truly pregnant. The doctor said everything looks good so far, but it'll be a high-risk pregnancy because of my age. I'm equal parts thrilled and terrified, but I'm taking it one day at a time. Henry is over the moon about the baby. I think it's really put things in perspective for him. He's been doting on me non-stop, waiting on me hand and foot. It's sweet, but I've had to remind him that I'm pregnant, not helpless. We've been talking a lot about the future and what kind of parents we want to be. We both agree that we want to raise our child in a loving, respectful home. No more walking on eggshells or tolerating bad behavior from anyone. Which brings me to Levi. After our big blow-up and him storming out, he couch-surfed with friends for a few weeks. Henry laid down the law and said he couldn't come back until he got a job, agreed to pay rent, and promised to treat me decently. Well, I guess that dose of the real world was the wake-up call Levi needed. He called Henry after a couple of weeks, crying and apologizing for everything. He said living on his own made him realize how much we'd done for him and how awful he'd been, especially to me. I was skeptical at first, but the kid really seems to have turned a corner. He got a full-time job at a warehouse, which he hates, but it's a paycheck. He's been giving us money for rent and groceries without us even asking, and he actually sat me down and gave me a sincere apology for all the crap he's put me through over the years. I could tell it wasn't easy for him to swallow his pride like that. We had a long talk about why he'd acted the way he did. A lot of it was hurt and anger over his parents' divorce that he unfairly took out on me. He said he knows that's no excuse and he wants to do better. I told him that I forgive him, but forgiveness doesn't mean a free pass to go back to old habits. He started joining us for dinner a few nights a week, and the atmosphere in the house is so different. There's no more tension crackling in the air. We're actually able to laugh and joke around together. The other night, he even offered to help me start setting up the nursery. I know we still have a long way to go, but it feels like a fresh start. I won't lie and say everything is perfect now. Levi still has his moments of teenage moodiness, and Henry and I don't always see eye to eye, but we're working through it as a family. And me? I'm finally putting myself first. I'm taking care of my body and my baby. I'm leaning on my friends and focusing on the things that bring me joy, like getting the nursery ready. For the first time in a long time, I wake up excited for the future. So that's where things stand. A month ago, I thought my whole world was falling apart. But now with a baby on the way and my little family coming together, I've never felt more blessed. To all of you who followed my story and offered support, thank you truly. Your kindness has meant the world to me. Here's to new beginnings, second chances, and always standing up for ourselves. I'll raise my non-alcoholic glass to that. Cheers, friends. Now on to the next story. Story 4. After 20 years of marriage, I'm divorcing my wife for sleeping with multiple men behind my back. My wife, 44F, and I, 43M, have been married for 20 years. We started dating in high school when I was a junior and she was a senior. We were long distance for her first 2 years of college while I was in high school and did 1 year at community college. Then, we went to college in the same city for a year and have lived together since we got married this summer after I graduated college. Our marriage has been pretty great so far, but I initiated a divorce after I discovered that she was sleeping with multiple other men for the 2 years we were long distance. Just after Christmas, we got together with a few friends of hers from college to catch up, have dinner, and hang out. We talked about a lot of stuff, and my wife mentioned that we met in high school, not that we dated, just that we met. Her old college roommate commented that it was crazy that we met in high school, had a few wild years in college, then ended up together. I played along and commented that I didn't know if my wife was as crazy as I was. The roommate started to tell a story, but my wife cut her off and said she was uncomfortable about it. I sensed something was up, so I said that we actually started dating in high school and were together for my wife's entire time at college. All of my wife's friends got real quiet, and the rest of the dinner was awkward. On the way out, one of her other roommates took me aside and said I should have an honest conversation about what happened at college. I asked my wife on the way home, and she kind of blew me off. I told her it was important that she was honest with me, and again she said it wasn't important. When we got home, I told her I was going to stay at my brother's house until she was ready to talk about what happened in college. The next day she came over and admitted to sleeping with several men during her first 2 years at college. She said she didn't consider it a big deal at the time because we were long distance and she didn't think a high school romance would last. I pressed for more details, and she said it was at least 10 different men, including at least 3 guys she introduced to me as friends when I came to visit on weekends and 1 guy she was still in contact with. I told her that I wanted a divorce and would be starting the paperwork as soon as I could, which I did on January 2nd. Her family and most of my family are telling me I shouldn't throw away my marriage over a few mistakes. I've stood by my belief that cheating on me with multiple men for years is unacceptable no matter when it happened, and the fact that she continued to maintain relationships with these guys right in front of me was an unacceptable amount of disrespect. We have 2 children, but they are 17 and 19, and I believe they will understand why I need to end the marriage. Am I wrong for leaving? I feel like I'm going crazy with the amount of people telling me to overlook years of infidelity and decades of lies. Edit 1. Holy, I'm glad I did this with a throwaway because the response here is unexpected. I obviously can't answer every question/comment, but I wanted to provide some detail for questions. The reason I posted this is that my wife and a few friends have been saying it's common to sleep with other folks when you're in a long-distance relationship and that I'm kind of the odd one out for not sleeping around. I felt like I was being gaslit, but I wanted an outside perspective. We live in a state with a waiting period to finalize a divorce, so I felt it was a reasonable idea to get some insight before things are finalized. After these comments, I see a handful of folks saying it's normal to sleep around during a long-distance relationship, but it seems to be a significant minority. We saw each other a couple of weekends a month during the 2-year college period. I lived about 3 hours away from her college, so it was long distance but not like cross-country. This was not a situation where we went months without seeing each other. The 3 guys I met while she was in college were meetups that happened during parties. The subject of me being a boyfriend didn't really come up, so I honestly don't know if these guys knew anything. The 1 guy we're still in contact with married a mutual friend from college. This is not some guy she secretly messages on the side. It's somebody we've talked to regularly for years. I've talked to him a few times since I learned about my wife. He said he didn't know we were dating at the time and has since blocked my wife on social media. Some folks have asked how the roommates didn't realize at our wedding that the timelines didn't work out. The main reason is that my wife and I had a very small ceremony with just close family in Texas, then went back to the East Coast to have a big party with friends. The typical reception/sharing details about how we met stuff didn't really happen, so her roommates didn't realize we started dating before college. It sounds like they thought we only dated for the year we were both in the same city then moved in together. I was open to therapy or some kind of attempt to save the marriage, but her insistence that this whole thing is common and I'm the one who's out of line is just too much for me. The only time she showed any remorse or even offered to reconcile is when I started filing paperwork. In the last week, she's gone back to saying she's right and I'm overreacting. This is also why I'm feeling like I'm being gaslit. It seems obvious that this is a major issue, but I've got my wife and others telling me it's normal and I'm overreacting. I'm not getting a paternity test unless my kids want to get one. I don't have any doubts that they are biologically mine, and no test will make them not my kids. I love them more than anything in the world, and my wife's infidelity won't change that. Even if one or both of them are not biologically mine, they've been my kids for 19 years and they will be my kids until I stop breathing. Edit 2. Hey all, I've been reading a bunch of the responses, but things are getting crazy and increasingly unhinged, so I probably won't be checking in more. Here are a few more answers to common questions I've seen. We were definitely exclusively dating at the time. First, dating culture was a lot different 20-ish years ago, and exclusive was kind of the default for most people. Second, we had a long and difficult discussion before she left for college about continuing the relationship long distance. She specifically wanted to stay together and even joked about her dad coming after me if I started sleeping around with girls at my school. Finally, at my senior prom, she was not able to attend and was very upset when I proposed going with a platonic female friend of mine. As a result, I ended up skipping my prom and hanging out with her instead. While we never said the word exclusive, I think the above reasons combined with the general relationship before she left are enough to assume exclusivity. Based on some comments here, I followed up with the friend that said I should have an honest conversation. She told me that 10 guys would be on the low end and that her biggest concern was that there was apparently at least one pregnancy scare that I didn't know about. I honestly don't think that really changes much. It's less about the number for me and more about the fact that she seems incapable of recognizing why this was wrong or why I feel betrayed. Thank you all for the helpful responses, even those that disagree with me. I will still be open to therapy if she's willing, but I honestly feel like it would be more about us being successful co-parents and finding closure than saving our marriage. Additional info on if the wife is willing to work to repair the marriage. It would change a lot if I felt that she wanted to fix this. Throughout our conversation about it, she repeatedly dismissed my feelings and told me I was overreacting to totally normal behavior. She didn't show any regret or consideration for how it hurt me until she realized I was serious about divorce. Then she got defensive and angry. She didn't offer to fix things in any way until I started the paperwork and notified her that I had a lawyer. I think we can navigate being parents. Our kids are older and I've been putting away money for college/post-high school for a long time, so a lot of the custody and monetary issues that come up shouldn't be a big problem. We're also both financially stable and make good money. On the timing of everything, I've hired a lawyer. He drafted an intent to separate and sent her a copy certified mail. As far as I know, that's not any legal divorce paper with the state, but rather a part of the process to ensure that she has an opportunity to hire her own lawyer if she wants to contest it. Actually going through the divorce will likely take months. I'm not really moved out. I've been crashing at my brother's place while I make arrangements for a more permanent living scenario. As far as timing goes, the dinner happened on the 26th. I went to my brother's house that night to cool off and give her a chance to think about things. We talked several times over the course of 4 to 5 days, and she made it clear that she didn't believe she did anything wrong. If there was any kind of remorse/regret/basic consideration of my feelings on her part, I probably would have waited. However, she didn't, so I found a divorce lawyer and he had boilerplate intent to separate agreements that we filled out and sent over the same day. Even now, we're obviously not legally divorced, and I don't even know if there is a legal concept of separation in my state, but I've made it clear this is happening and started the process. Update 1. February 5th, 2024. I wanted to provide some updates here as my original post got a lot of traction. First, let's talk about the things I learned about the situation in college after talking to my wife in sessions and texting with two of her roommates. It's clear that her roommates knew something was up in college. They said they thought the situation was weird and likely involved cheating. My wife had told them that we both had some wild times in college and worked it out before we got married, so they never really brought it up. The roommate who pulled me aside recently was uncomfortable with the fact that my wife clearly didn't talk it through with me and wanted me to know. As far as being introduced to guys she slept with, apparently that was not intentional for one of the guys. He ended up dating and then marrying one of our mutual friends from college. This is the guy she was in contact with. In the other situations, she initially blamed me in the counseling session but has now agreed it was bad. When I went to visit her, she planned to hang out in the room or just hang out together alone, but I wanted to go to a few parties because in HS and community college I didn't really have parties to go to. She didn't expect me to meet the guys, but they were at the parties and she felt she didn't really have a choice. I still think this is kind of shitty, but it's not as bad as her intentionally parading me in front of the guys. Most of our discussion in therapy has been talking about why I think it's a big deal and she doesn't. She initially said that none of these guys were in relationships with her, and it was mostly one-night stands or FWB, since she didn't view them as romantic relationships. She didn't see the big deal. Her words, not mine. My opinion is that we never said that was okay and she actively prevented me from doing the same. After digging into this across 2 sessions and my wife talking to some friends, she now agrees that it was a breach of our trust/relationship. This is the shared understanding that has helped us talk about the situation more honestly and helped us get from arguing to talking, which is why I'm optimistic about co-parenting. Now, here's why I'm 100% set on divorce. 2 things came up that make me want to leave the marriage. First, about 10 years ago we went through a really rough patch and had a dead bedroom for about 2 years. She had expressed that our sex life was becoming boring, so I tried to spice things up. Nothing crazy, just role play and like Spencer's gift-level sex toys. Apparently she had been hung up on some sexual experiences that happened in college that she is not comfortable talking about and wanted me to try them, but when I did, it made her feel awkward and guilty that it made her think of other men while she was with me. The fact that she's saying these experiences were meaningless, but they're still impacting our marriage tells me they meant more than she wants to say. Second, she admitted that she has been flirting with coworkers on business trips since the pandemic ended. She says she has never slept with anybody, but it got as far as going on a date with one of her male coworkers. That was the absolute deal-breaker for me. We have told our children that we're getting a divorce. We told them it was due to some bad decisions that we made in college that we're having trouble moving past. My 19-year-old, who is in college, asked me if I cheated on my wife while she was away at college. My wife got a little shaken up but admitted to the kids that she's the one who cheated. We have agreed to not share any additional details with the kids. I reinforced that both of us will be there for the kids and that we are in therapy to help make sure we handle this in the best way for the family. I also told the kids that if they wanted to talk to either of us or a therapist about it, that I would fully support it. We've started talking to a mediator about how to proceed with the divorce, and unless things change, we should be able to have an amicable divorce. We're both financially stable on our own, we have no major debts, and our kids are older so custody isn't a major issue. This has been a shitty couple of months for me, but I'm doing okay now and I honestly am grateful that my last post blew up because it both validated some of my feelings but also motivated me to go to counseling with my wife. Comments where OP has replied. Comment 1. Sorry OP, but this is for the best. She's been keeping you in the dark for over 20 years. She says she has never slept with anybody, but it got as far as going on a date with one of her male coworkers. If you believe this, then I got a bridge on Mars to sell you. Dead bedrooms for young couples usually mean someone is getting it somewhere else. OP. I don't really believe it, but I also don't think it's worth it to dig into it more. I'm gonna get an STD panel done to make sure I'm safe, and I really don't need to know anymore. If it was just a date, we're getting divorced. If it was more, we're still getting a divorce. So pushing the issue won't do anything but make it harder for us to co-parent. I'm also reasonably sure that she was cheating during our dead bedroom situation. We were having sex like once every 2 to 3 months, and we usually have sex 2 to 3 times a week. Again, I have enough to know it's time to move on, and digging more into it will only make the divorce harder. Comment 2. Has she even apologized for everything she put you through, especially the part where she went on a date with some? OP. Before our counseling and at the first appointment, she was not apologetic. In the second appointment, the focus was for me to explain the effect it had on me. She has expressed remorse and apologized repeatedly since that session. It's too little too late, but she's not some kind of emotionless monster. Comment 3. I'm super curious to know what kind of sexual things she was hung up on from her past, but that she felt uncomfortable doing with you. That alone seems very red flaggy. OP. I didn't really want to dig into it too much. Right before the dead bedroom stuff started, she was asking to experiment with new stuff in the bedroom. It was mostly BDSM kind of stuff that was a little more intense than I was comfortable with at the time. 50 Shades was popular and she got into some other smutty kind of reading. I attributed the change in sex to that, but my guess is that some of the guys she was with in college were into BDSM stuff. Maybe it was a combination of the two. She hasn't admitted to cheating during that time, but I'd be willing to bet the dead bedroom at home was because she found another person to do kinky with. When asked about why the daughter thought he cheated. To be fair, my 19-year-old daughter had some issues with shitty boyfriends who have either cheated or dumped her suddenly to be with somebody else. I'm also the one who left the house. Given her experience with men and the fact that I'm the one who left the house, it makes sense that would be her first thought when cheating came up. My wife made it clear that she was the one who cheated. TBH, I'm not really too concerned about the narrative here. From what I can tell, she hasn't said anything bad about me to our kids. In addition, given her admission of recent flirting/cheating and the fact that she's ready to file a joint amicable divorce after 6 weeks and 3 counseling sessions, I think she was ready to move on before I was. It makes the logistics of the divorce easier, but it hurts a bit to realize she's having an easier time walking away from a 20-year marriage than I am. OP, when told not to be surprised if she starts dating again. I'm pretty sure that she's already looking. We've had one meeting with an equitable divorce mediator, and she specifically stated that we are married until the divorce is final and any adultery that happens before that date could jeopardize the amicable divorce settlement. It seems kind of dumb to me since we're getting divorced due to infidelity, but my STBX was visibly grumpy when that came up. I also imagine that the fact that I'm living in the guest room isn't helping her prospects. At the end of the day, I'm doing my best to try to accept that our marriage is over, and I've been going to therapy on my own in addition to our couples therapy to help deal with it. I'm mentally prepared for the fact that there's a good chance I see the coworker she only dated again, but I'm also hopeful that I can find a place and be ready to move out before the divorce is finalized. If everything goes well and we can create a plan with a mediator, we will be divorced by summer. I will be in my own place and she can just date whichever coworker she wants. Now on to the next story. Story 5. I stayed in my failing marriage until my kids were in a better place, then got divorced. Now my whole family and in-laws are mad at me, but only my kids are siding with me. My ex-wife and I were married for over 20 years and have 2 children together, 22M and 20F. For most of my marriage, things were pretty balanced. We both shared housework and childcare responsibilities. We were each stay-at-home parents for over a year after each child. She with our son, and me with our son and daughter. We always had agreements on how we wanted to divide work and generally had decent communication. This changed when my oldest went to high school. My wife got a new job that was both very demanding on her time and was 50% travel. This meant that I had to handle everything about 2 weeks per month, and when she was home, she wasn't holding up her side of the work with agreements. I did my best to be accommodating, and we worked through redistributing chores and housework a few times to make it fit her schedule better. But a lot of the work just kept falling to me. When the pandemic happened, things got worse, but I tried to just suck it up because I knew the lockdowns were temporary. Finally, when things opened back up, things continued to decline, and I asked to go to counseling. She missed a lot of our meetings and just didn't commit to it. At this point, I decided that I wanted a divorce. Unfortunately, it was a really tough time for the family. My son was getting ready for college in person after his freshman year being remote, which was both a financial and logistical challenge. At the same time, my daughter was also having some issues with depression, and I had become her main support person with my wife gone half the time. I made a decision to wait until my daughter was in a better mental state and our family was in a financially stable place before I filed for divorce. I did my best to continue to contribute and was essentially a single parent for 3 years. On a few occasions, I brought up counseling again, but my wife said things were good and wouldn't go. We pretty much didn't have sex for that period of time. And there was one summer where she essentially moved to North Carolina for 6 weeks for work. She came home on some weekends. Last year, after my daughter started her sophomore year of college and was in a better place mentally and emotionally, I sold off some of my stock investments to create a trust for my kids to ensure college was covered. Then I filed for divorce. First, my wife was really pissed. Then she left to live in North Carolina again. When she came back 4 weeks later, she said she wanted to work through it, but I told her I had made the decision to leave years ago and wasn't interested. We eventually worked through mediation and got an amicable divorce. My kids live with me now and support me, but all of my in-laws and even most of my family outside of my sister think I'm selfish. They believe I should have forced the issue more when we started counseling and either divorced or made it clearer to my wife how important counseling was to me. They've called me selfish, and some of my in-laws are refusing to interact with my kids when they're at my house. For example, my daughter FaceTimed her grandmother once this summer, and she hung up once she saw that my daughter was at my house. They also created a bit of a scene at my son's graduation in the spring, refusing to acknowledge me and demanding that my son choose to celebrate with them or me rather than having dinner together as a group. I encouraged my son to go with them and we had our own celebration later, but something happened at the dinner, and my son has lived with me and been almost no contact with them since. I honestly feel like I did what was best for my kids, but now it feels like their mom's family is punishing them, and I feel like a terrible father. I admit that it might have been more mature to address the issue head-on with my relationship with my ex, but I felt that it was about more than just the two of us. Frankly, I feel like my lack of backbone years ago has made this divorce worse for my kids. But I also believe that if I had to do it again, I would still prioritize my kids over my own feelings and make the same choice. Edit. Holy crap, this blew up. First off, thanks to folks who provided feedback and comments. I really felt like both the positive and negative comments helped me get a little perspective on things. I've seen a few comments come up multiple times, so I figure it's worth answering them here before I move on. 1. This is an account I created to ask an embarrassing dating question earlier this year. I created it because my main username is recognizable, and I reused it now because I don't really want to air my issues associated with a known username. 2. When my wife took the job, we were doing well financially, but the job still came with a big raise. I was making about $200,000, and the job she took gave her a raise from about $80,000 to $140,000. That was enough that we could go from saving enough to have an emergency fund to having enough to pay for our kids' college outright. We both work in tech, but she works for a defense contractor, and some of the work needs to be done on-site, and only one of the offices related to her work is near where we live. When we originally discussed the job, her plan was to work in the high-travel role for some time, then try to transfer to a lower-travel role based near us. She got promoted a few times, and staying near our home wasn't an option unless she took a bit of a pay and title cut. When we divorced, I was making about $280,000, and she made a little over $300,000. Some folks were also confused by my stock comment. I'm a software engineer for a big tech company, and about 20% to 30% of my salary comes in the form of RSUs, restricted stock units. I'm not an investor by any means, and I was just selling off stock mostly to cover my daughter's college and pay off what debt my son had. 3. I know a lot of people are jumping right to an affair, but I really doubt it. In school, my wife and I were the obnoxious kids who reminded the teacher about homework, and she's a massive introvert. Her working late in a hotel room is much more likely than her sleeping around or keeping some secret family. There's a chance I'm wrong here, but I think this is more a situation where Reddit sometimes thinks all divorces end with infidelity. 4. When I say we had an amicable divorce, I mean that more in the legal sense than the emotional sense. Uncontested might be a better term. The only significant asset we had that wasn't easily split was our home. My wife loves the house, and I frankly wanted something different, so she bought out my portion of it. Our kids are adults, so there's no custody. Our assets are mostly divisible, so no issues there. Our salaries were comparable, so there was no alimony. We each had a car. Overall, it was pretty straightforward to divide things evenly, and neither of us wanted to draw things out. We didn't end the marriage as friends by any means, but from a legal standpoint, it was amicable because we decided on an arrangement with a mediator and only involved lawyers briefly to actually draft the final paperwork for the judge to sign off on. Additional information from OP on some other questions. OP, why did your wife disappear off to a travel job? Was fun money separate and based on income? My wife has never wanted to be a homemaker/traditional kind of wife and always placed a lot of value on her career. It's part of the reason I married her. That being said, I never expected her to take a job that had so much travel, and I still don't completely understand why she did it. I think part of it was that she knew things were tough at home and this was an escape. I also know she had mostly younger coworkers, and there was some amount of feeling like a jet-setter. Sorry, I can't think of a more current term. Why did you have chore arrangements like you were roommates that were expected to be adhered to even when she got the travel job? I'm not sure exactly what you mean here. I think most relationships include establishing who's responsible for certain chores/work around the house. Also, I obviously didn't expect her to do housework while she was away. But as I said, she didn't really help out when she was back. I didn't expect her to do all the work when she was back or anything, just her fair share when she was home. Why did you have a deleted post from Low Karma about crazy dating misadventures only recently? Because I started dating after the divorce, and being in my 40s and trying to figure out dating hasn't gone well. I've addressed this in other comments, but that post was actually the reason I made this throwaway account, and I deleted it when I realized I was really out of touch with current dating norms. What is the reason your side of the family is giving you for being pissed at you as well? My family believes the only reason for divorce is infidelity or abuse. They are pretty conservative/traditional. How did you phrase your request for counseling? Initially, it was pretty soft. I mentioned it a few times but didn't really push. Around 2021, I told her that I felt that our marriage was falling apart, and I told her that I thought the only way to move forward was counseling. She agreed and we started, but as I said in my post, she didn't commit to it. We had Zoom sessions when she was traveling, and she often wouldn't show up. Update. I'm still getting comments and messages from time to time about that post, so I figured I would take some time to give an update. Quick summary of the original post. My wife became more and more distant in our marriage, and I decided to get a divorce, but I waited about 3 years to do it after I decided because I felt it was best for the kids. My kids chose to live with me and generally were on my side, but my in-laws and family were pretty mad at me. Things are going much better overall since the post. I got a lot of support but also a lot of criticism which I took to heart. I have been putting in some work to mend fences and help get things to a more reasonable state. I don't expect my ex or her family to be friends with me, but I at least want to be on good terms. My relationship with my parents and family is much better, and this Christmas was pretty much back to normal. My family is very conservative, especially when it comes to marriage, but they finally understand how bad it had become and have reluctantly accepted it. My relationship with my ex and, more importantly, her relationship with our kids has also improved. She has apparently been going to therapy on her own, and while she hasn't gone into details, she does seem to be a lot less angry about what happened. We decided to have Thanksgiving together so we could all talk through things with the kids. It was a bit messy, and there were a lot of tears, but we also got to a place where we all understand each other a bit more. We all agree that I shouldn't have waited so long to go through with the divorce, but my ex and kids also say they understand why I did it. My ex-wife and I even had a conversation about dating, which was weird, but surprisingly kind of nice. My ex-in-laws still think I'm a horrible person, and most refuse to talk to me, but they have started treating my kids well. My kids went to the in-laws' place for Christmas Eve and told me it went okay. We talked about it on Christmas, and while they didn't give many details, they did say they planned to do something on New Year's Eve with my ex and the in-laws. So I'm happy about that. Sorry this isn't a juicy update with anything crazy, but I was bored during the holiday downtime and thought I would log in and post some details. One thing I've learned from this, and I hope others learn, too. Even if your heart's in the right place, it's probably better to divorce when the marriage is over rather than putting up a facade for years. I don't regret getting a divorce, but I do wish I hadn't waited 3 years when I knew it was over. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Parents can't be in the same room after their divorce 5 years ago. Dad says he won't come to my wedding if mom's there, but I'm done playing their games of keeping them apart. I never thought I would be posting to Reddit, but here we are. My fiancé Steve and I are getting married in 8 months. We don't have a lot of money, and honestly neither of us can stand fancy stuff. So we are having a very private ceremony with only his best man and my maid of honor as witnesses. Then we are having a tiny reception afterwards with only 50 people total, so obviously this is going to be quite an intimate reception. Here is the thing. My parents can't really stand each other, or at least my dad can't stand my mom. 5 years ago, in my last year of high school, my mother was caught having an affair with her married coworker. It destroyed my parents' marriage. My father became a changed man. He was always a happy and confident, outgoing guy, but he became quiet, withdrawn, and just empty. It's killed me seeing him like this. My mother moved out because me and my younger brother, who was 15 at the time, basically told her to BTFO. I have always been close with my mom, loved her to pieces, but finding out about her affair and seeing what it did to my dad. I've always known my dad to adore my mother, nuked my relationship with her. My brother and I went no contact with her for about a year. I finally relented when I sent her an invitation to my high school graduation but made it clear her partner was not invited. My brother took a little longer to come around, but he talks to her from time to time. Both of us told the judge we wanted to live with our dad full-time, which was granted to us. My relationship with my mother is still strained and distant. I know she wants more. She's constantly trying to talk to me, and she sobbed in relief when I sent her my graduation invite after not talking to her for almost a year. But I keep her at arm's length and merely make polite, casual conversation now and again. I still love my mother and I don't want to cut her out completely. But this is as close as I want her, and I will never again have a close relationship with her. As for her affair partner, apparently they are still together after his wife caught and divorced him. I have never met him and made it clear to my mother I do not want to. If Mom and I meet for coffee or anywhere, he is not to come. I refuse to see pictures or discuss him with her. If she brings him up, I immediately change the subject. I have no idea if my mom is happy with him, if they're doing well, etc. I frankly don't care. As for my father, in a way we are closer, but he clearly has his issues. It's been 5 years and he's clearly not over the cheating and divorce. He's not angry or bitter about it, just very sad and depressed. He won't call my mom or her lover by their names. He calls them he/him and she/her. He hasn't dated once since the divorce either. He won't be around her. For my graduation, they had to be at polar opposite ends of the bleachers, and I had to have my phone on me so I could text my mom when she was allowed to approach and congratulate me, and then so I could text my dad to let him know my mom left. It will be this way when I graduate college as well. So my question goes to my wedding. After I told my dad what Steve and I had planned for our wedding and reception, he got very quiet and asked if I planned on inviting her and him. I said yes, I would probably invite my mom, even though her partner is not invited. My dad quietly said, "It's rude to only invite one half of a couple." He then said he didn't think he could come if she was going to be there, that maybe he could be there before or after she comes, but he just doesn't think he could interact with her in such a close setting. I was floored and very hurt. I told my dad I would think about it. Steve and I need to start sending out save the dates pretty soon, so we need to get this resolved. I've talked about this with Steve, and while he is very sweet and says he will fully support me no matter what decision I make, that I'm the only one who can make this choice. I also talked to my brother about it, and he says he will show up no matter what, but he won't have much to do with our mother if she's invited beyond basic courtesies, and that he understands Dad's position but thinks he's being kind of ridiculous. He also said, technically it's rude to not invite her boyfriend, but it's also pretty rude to destroy 2 families by having an affair with another married man. So her boyfriend can go F himself and mother can shove wedding etiquette up her. Personally, he'd prefer I not invite her either, but it's my wedding and I can do what I want and he will roll with it. My brother is a very blunt man and has not been as forgiving of the affair as I have. So now I'm stuck. On the one hand, if we are being honest, I really do want to invite my mother to my wedding reception. I absolutely will not invite her boyfriend, regardless of how tacky it seems. He is not and will never be a part of our family, and honestly, I'm kind of angry with my dad. Believe me, I understand his pain and hurt, but it's been 5 years and I think he needs to start moving on. It's fine if he doesn't like mom. I don't much like her either. But to boycott my own wedding because she might be coming? Get over yourself. It's like his hurt feelings are more important than his only daughter's wedding. He really can't suck it up and just be in a reception hall with her for a few hours? On the other, I really love my dad. I hate seeing him hurt. I can't stand causing him pain. If I absolutely have to choose between my two parents, I will pick my father every time. Despite him being kind of a wet blanket about the wedding, he's a good man with a good heart. My dad and I are very close and I don't want to jeopardize my relationship with him. And I would much rather he be at my wedding than my mother. Plus, I'm thinking since I refused to invite my mom's boyfriend and it really is considered a wedding faux pas, I just shouldn't invite her altogether. I really don't want my dad to not come. But despite how my mom and I are not and will never be close again and how I think she's getting her just desserts for having an affair, I don't want to hurt her by not inviting her altogether. I'm well and truly stuck. I don't know what to do and honestly I've broken down crying over this a few times because it's just so stressful and I feel caught in the middle between two people I love. Please help. Reddit. Update. Hi everyone. Sorry I took so long to post, but I got very busy, part of which was spent graduating college, so I'm glad that's finally out of the way. So I was reading all the comments and the more time went on, the more angry and upset I became. People eventually started saying, why should parents always have to sacrifice for children? Some said I was being a bridezilla and only caring about my day. Of course I care. It's my wedding. It's supposed to be a once-in-a-lifetime event that I want to share with everyone. Many people said my dad had depression and my mother's actions were so evil he was forever off the hook for good. Everyone was giving suggestions on how I could meticulously plan the days to rotate everyone and I felt like screaming. Steve eventually told me to get off of Reddit because he hated seeing me so upset. I couldn't even say exactly why I was upset. I just was. Steve said maybe I should go back to my old therapist that I had when my parents got divorced and talk it out with her. To me, this seemed like a great idea. I called her up and asked to have an appointment despite finals being right around the corner. So I went and everything came out. How much I hurt still from what mom did and how we can never be close again. And honestly how angry I am at my father. I never really realized it, but I've gotten so furious and resentful of him. How he never even tried to get out of his funk, how dejected he acted if mom somehow came up, how he never said anything directly bad about her but subtly made me feel so guilty for loving her, acting mopey, going from fine to depressed if she somehow came up, how I always feel like I have to walk on eggshells around him and how he gets a free pass because he got cheated on, something that happens to tons of people. Every day. I talked and talked and talked. I made a couple more appointments. I got through finals. I want to shout out to Steve here. He is the only reason I got through it all, passed, and got my degree. He is an incredible human being. The tipping point was my graduation day. Once again, my father made it clear mom couldn't be sat near him and he couldn't be near her at all. I had to text her when she could come talk to me and had to text him once she left. Her boyfriend was of course not invited. But it was so embarrassing having to contact the officials in charge of the ceremony and ask if my tickets could be changed so my parents could sit far away from each other. They were kind and understanding, but that's when I began to get very, very angry. My mom has no problem with my dad. She doesn't mind being near him, even though she doesn't love him. I began to think how I'm going to have to rearrange all my milestones. My marriage, when I have children, my children's christenings and birthday parties, etc. Graduation was miserable. I couldn't look in any one direction to see my family as I got my degree and walked the stage because they had to be spread out. I had to make sure my phone was on me and fully charged so I could coordinate my mother and father's locations. It was so awkward mingling with one group and then my mother, knowing both groups were waiting to have their turn. My brother interacted with my mother and he was kind of cold but cordial nonetheless. My mother made no complaints, didn't try to argue or force herself in there, and patiently waited for her turn even though I could tell she was dying to spend more time with me. Pictures had to be rotated. I couldn't have one with all my family in there. My father was constantly texting during my time with her, asking if she had left yet and if he could come back now. Seemed so childish, honestly. The rest of my family could tolerate my mother being around. After all, the divorce was years ago. It's time to start getting over it and moving on with life. It was only because of my dad that I couldn't relax and just be happy and enjoy my graduation with my family. I was supposed to go to dinner with my dad, boyfriend, and other family after graduation to celebrate. I told them I felt very sick and I needed to go home. I just didn't want to be around anyone anymore. Steve just held me while I bawled my eyes out. I hadn't cried that hard in years. I met with my therapist a couple more times. This is turning into a novel, so I will summarize what I came to realize in therapy. While the initial anger and hate I felt for my mom was real, I never stopped loving her, but I felt like because my dad had been wronged, I had to take his side. My dad has always made me feel guilty for loving my mother still. While his actions have never been overt, it has been very subtle manipulation. I felt like I had to give my dad carte blanche, whatever he wanted, because if I didn't, I felt like I would lose him too, that he would reject and have nothing to do with me if I didn't practically ostracize my mother. My mother was at one point my best friend, and that's gone. I couldn't stand losing both my parents, so Dad has gotten whatever he wanted, and I'm realizing that in a subtle way, Dad has been manipulating my brother and I to treat our mother terribly for years to punish her. My dad has always been a super passive-aggressive guy. It's nothing new. He's always guilt-tripped people and made these little comments that twist people up and hurt them. It's his form of control. I love both my parents. My mother did a terrible, horrible thing, but my dad is no saint either. My mom was just more upfront about her awfulness. My therapist and Steve also pointed out that if my dad is truly depressed or emotionally damaged, etc., he has never sought to get help for it. Instead, he has projected his problems and pain onto everyone else and made it their burden instead of taking responsibility for himself and attempting to go on with life, and that is not okay. I called my mom and asked her over for tea. Steve left to give us privacy. I could list everything we said and talked about, but it would make the post longer. Basically, my mom never loved my dad and should never have agreed to marry him. My dad knew mom didn't love him but didn't care and insisted she would love him eventually. Some very eye-opening things were said that made sense. My mother never trash-talked my dad. Never has. But she gave insights as to why the affair happened. She says she understands it's no excuse for what she did, and she is so very sorry for her own selfishness and weakness. Basically, both my parents are human and mistakes were made from both sides. My mom had the affair, yes, but it's not like my dad was the perfect man either. While I still will never again be close to my mom, perhaps I don't need to be quite as harsh with her as I have been. We will still be low contact, but I did decide that I do want her there for the wedding and for the birth of any children I have, etc. I love my mom, always have and always will. She may not have been a good wife, but she was an excellent mother and I don't want to cut her out completely. I think my kids' lives will be more enriched having her in it. My mother started crying when I told her she was invited to the wedding, even though I made it clear to her that her boyfriend is not invited. She didn't argue with me on that at all and said she thought I had asked her to my house to tell her I would not be inviting her, and she had been prepared to accept that rejection and understand it. I did tell her that if Dad was there she was to stay away from him and not try to mend any fences at my wedding. She says she stands completely and will mingle with my grandparents, her parents, and my aunts, uncles, and cousins, her siblings and their children. I made it clear to my mother that if she even attempted to talk to Dad or any of his family she would be thrown out. She agreed without question. Steve and I had a final sit-down before I called my dad. I asked him to please give me his honest opinion. Steve relented and said while he thought my mother had done the inexcusable, she actually seemed remorseful and willing to accept the consequences of her actions and to move on, and that my dad, while a nice guy, came off as way too sensitive and just weak. He said that my dad didn't cheat, but he had caused me a lot of pain and anxiety since the divorce, and it made him very angry, and it was getting hard to like or tolerate my dad, and that his family felt the same way, that my dad was actually a master bully in disguise as a super nice guy. I called my dad and asked to come over and that I needed to talk about something. I sat him down in his living room so this talk was in his space where he could retreat if he needed to and said basically, "Dad, I love you so much. You mean the world to me, but after the fiasco of my graduation, I've come to realize I have had enough of feeling like I have to pick sides for you and Mom. I'm sorry what happened, Dad. I really am, but that was 5 years ago. You lost a wife, but I didn't lose a mom. I'm sure you don't mean to, but you've been making me feel like I can't be close with you if I want to have any kind of relationship with Mom. If it's still impossible to even be in the room with her dad, then maybe you need to talk to someone so you can start feeling better and not be in so much pain. Is there some kind of abuse that happened that you're not telling me about that makes this impossible? My dad seemed shocked and then started to get really upset and basically said Mom had never hit him or anything, but that she cheated and broke his heart, and that was reason enough to cut her out. Dad also said I couldn't understand because I hadn't been cheated on, I didn't know what real love was, and also implied it was my fault and my brother's fault because if we weren't a part of their relationship he could move on, but we always remind him of her and what they had. How because of us he can't make a clean break since she's in our lives, etc. I'm sure many Redditors will disagree, but this is my dad being typically passive, insinuating that because my brother and I exist, he can't get better because we are reminders of Mother and it's our fault we exist so he can't cut her out totally. I realize that my dad thinks that if he can get me and my brother to cut my mom out, not only will he succeed in punishing her, but he can have us all to himself and not have to share with her and deal with his hurt. He's getting us to do the dirty work for him so he doesn't have to take responsibility. I told my dad that I loved him and wanted him at the wedding but Mother is invited. Her boyfriend isn't, but she is. I told Dad that I had talked to her and I promised him she would leave him alone and stay away from him and his family, and could he not just put aside differences for a few hours to celebrate with me and Steve on our day? He said absolutely not and that I was being unfair and insensitive and that my mom had poisoned me against him, that he wasn't the cheat and she needed to deal with what she had done and not come and by inviting her I was clearly supporting her cheating and that we couldn't be close if that was the case because I was being too much like her. I had had enough. I stood up and said, Dad, Steve and I really want you there. You are free to come or not. I love you, but if you don't come, it will absolutely affect our relationship going forward. I am not doing any more separate celebrations or events. People can either come or stay home for weddings, parties, births, and whatever. It's getting ridiculous and I'm sick of being in the middle. The rest is up to you and Mom. Then I left. I haven't heard from my dad since. That's been hard, but I feel like I did the right thing. I also called my brother and told him everything that happened. My brother was very quiet. He then said while he still hates our mom for what she did and thinks she's a bitch, that maybe there is more to this than he realized and that he thinks our dad is being a selfish jerk and needs to get over himself. He said it's fine Mom is coming to the wedding and that he would be nice to her, so that's that. I'm sure many will disagree and be angry with me, but Steve and I feel we made the right call. Steve loves and supports me and that's all that matters. I talked to my therapist about it and she said it's possible I was harsh but that maybe my dad needed to hear that since he has been coddled and enabled for 5 years. I am fully prepared for my dad to not show up. If he doesn't, it's his loss. Thanks again to everyone who gave me input. Some of your comments were very eye-opening. I may post an update in the future after the wedding, but I haven't decided yet. Edit. While this blew up, thank you everyone who commented and offered a POV. Except for the people sending PMs of death threats. I've gotten at least half a dozen of those plus calling me a whore, ironic since I'm a virgin, and hoping Steve cheats. You sound like lovely, warm people full of happiness. I wanted to point out some things that keep coming up. 1. Remember, I come from a religion and culture that is very different from most people here. Divorce is shameful for us. It is humiliating. The only justifiable reason for divorce is an affair. For our people, divorce because you're not happy is not an excusable reason. An affair is the only way out. However, that being said, the person who commits the affair has just crippled themselves. Sex is very holy and pure in our religion and culture. It is to be between husband and wife only. That's it. And if you break up a marriage because of it, you are forever blacklisted. While my mother should have gotten a divorce without having an affair, she still would have had a scarlet letter on her chest for getting divorced for no reason, which is an ultimate act of selfishness. Marriage is very holy in our culture. To divorce for any reason other than an affair is to be like an unbelieving sinner, which is quite simply not acceptable. I don't necessarily agree with this, as I'm a little more liberal than the rest of my family and most people, but it is what it is. 2. My mother did not get off scot-free. She is no longer welcome in her church and none of her friends associate with her anymore. Her family, her friends, her church, her entire community has shunned her. She also lost her job because dipping your pen in company ink is expressly frowned upon at her former workplace. Both she and her lover lost their jobs and had to find new ones. 3. Many are saying I need to start including my mom's partner in things and saying the fact she has been with him this whole time shows they have something special. It actually does not. I didn't put this in my post, but my mom and I actually talked about her boyfriend for the first time. They are on the verge of breaking up and their relationship has been rocky for a while. P's family and friends have disowned him too. He is not of our religion or culture. Double bogus for my mom for taking a lover outside the faith. But no one wants anything to do with P's ex-wife has made their lives hell and will not let him see his kids. When he does see them, they treat my mother terribly and make their hatred known. P is also sick of being not invited to every family event on our side and says mom needs to start demanding he be invited to things. Mom is of the viewpoint that they brought misery on themselves and need to accept the consequences of their actions, and furthermore, knows that if she insisted on bringing P, she would burn the last of the bridges she has with us and will not do that. P is sick of her not putting him first and their relationship is falling apart because of it. The only reason they have lasted this long is because my mom and P only have each other because no one else wants them and they both know it. My mom actually does love her boyfriend, but he does not love her anymore, and she knows they aren't going to make it. 4. Many are saying, even explicitly hoping Steve cheats on me, so I understand my dad's pain because I clearly don't since I haven't been cheated on. Hey, that's what my dad said. This experience has actually taught me the opposite. If Steve were to cheat, I would be out of my mind with pain and hurt. I wouldn't be able to function. I don't blame my dad for being unable to be around my mother at first. If I had children with Steve, as much as it would suck, I would put on my big girl pants and do what needed to be done for my kids. I've gotten plenty of comments and PMs from people who were cheated on and heartbroken and devastated, and they did what needed to be done. Since I now know what it's like to have parents that pick their pain over their kids, I know I would never want to put my kids through that. It's just basic human decency. 5. I am not on any parent's side. I don't love either of my parents more, nor do I think either should be demonized and bashed or put on a pedestal and coddled. My parents are human and imperfect. They are both great people and they both have done some really shitty things. That's it and that's all. Now on to the next story. Story 7. I let Dad and his new wife stay in my house because he was struggling financially, but then, just 1 month later, his wife sits me down for a talk to get me to pay monthly rent. My life has always been difficult since the moment I was born. You see, my mom passed away while giving birth to me in the hospital. I was then raised by my dad, who somehow blamed me, a literal baby, for his wife's untimely death. Throughout my childhood, there was not a single day in our house that passed without my dad reminding me in his own harsh way that I was the reason my mom was gone from this world. He would constantly tell me how my birth had taken away the person he loved the most and how he never really wanted me in the first place. He would point out that because my life had come at such a high cost, I needed to work hard and live up to it. Otherwise, my mom's death would have been in vain. As you can imagine, hearing those harsh words as a child was devastating. I was too young to fully understand the complexities of grief, loss, and anger. I needed my mom too, but she was gone, and the only living parent I had left treated me like I was the problem. My dad, who was supposed to be my protector, my guide, my source of comfort, instead became the one who constantly reminded me that I was unwanted in his life, that my very existence was a curse. Growing up in that environment was incredibly difficult. I often felt guilty for even existing, for breathing. There were times when I desperately wanted to talk to him, to tell him how his words hurt, how they made me feel like I didn't belong even in my own home, but fear kept me silent. The few times I did try to speak up, I was met with more bitterness and anger. The result was a childhood marked by a profound sense of loneliness and isolation. While other kids had parents who cheered them on, who comforted them when they were sad, and who made them feel safe, I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to avoid triggering more of my dad's resentment towards me. It wasn't just the lack of love that hurt, but the presence of so much anger and blame directed at a part of me I couldn't change, the simple fact that I was alive. Despite everything, I tried to understand my dad's pain. I knew losing my mom had shattered him and that he never fully recovered from that loss, but it didn't make it any easier to bear the weight of his words. I was just a child, trying to find my place in a world that often felt cold and unwelcoming. And yet, despite all the hurt, deep down, I still longed for his approval, his love, his acknowledgement. I always hoped that despite everything, I could somehow make my dad proud. I remember the anticipation I felt every time I brought home a report card with good grades, thinking that maybe this time, things would be different. I would go to him full of excitement, eager to show him what I had accomplished, hoping for a smile, a word of encouragement, anything that would make me feel like I was enough in his eyes. But every time it was the same. He would barely glance at my grades, let out a grunt, and tell me to keep studying harder because it still wasn't good enough. He would point out that there were hundreds of other kids who could get the grades I got, so it wasn't really a big deal. Instead of pride or approval, I was met with indifference and the constant reminder that I wasn't meeting his expectations. No matter how well I did, it was never enough for him. It wasn't just academics that I felt the weight of his disapproval. Anytime I wanted to do something outside of school, like play sports or participate in activities with my friends, he would shut it down immediately. I was told that the only thing I needed to focus on was my studies so I could get the heck out of his house as soon as possible. Those words stung, reminding me that I was more of a burden to him than a child to be loved and cared for. My friends would talk about how their parents encouraged them to explore their interests and enjoy their childhood. But for me, there was no such support. I was constantly reminded I was just a guest in his house and that I needed to do as I was told or risk being thrown out. The weekends, which should have been a time to relax or have fun with friends, were no different. If I ever asked to go out or spend time with my friends, he would go on a rant about how I was wasting his money, even if all I wanted to do was something simple like hang out at a friend's house or go to the park. He would launch into a lecture about how hard he was working to put me through school and how I had no right to waste time or resources on maintaining friendships. It was as if anything that brought me joy or a sense of normalcy was automatically deemed unworthy or frivolous by him. I remember one of the most painful memories was how he reacted to my 15th birthday. Now, most kids look forward to their birthdays with excitement, planning parties or gatherings with friends. But for me, it was a day filled with dread. Each year, he didn't like me celebrating my birthdays, but that year I thought things would be different. I wanted to go out for a movie with my friends and have some pizza. When I finally mustered up the courage to ask him for some money, he had a fit. He screamed and told me that I had no right to celebrate the date since it was also the day that my mom had passed away. He made it clear to me that my birthday was always going to be the worst day of the year for him and that I should never even think about enjoying it. As a result, I never celebrated with my friends. As you can imagine, over time, all of these repeated experiences taught me that my dad clearly hated me and didn't want me around. The constant rejection and criticism took a toll on me, making me feel like I was always walking on thin ice, trying not to do anything that would trigger his anger or disapproval. I slowly learned to keep my hopes and dreams to myself. I stopped expecting approval or encouragement from him because I knew it would only lead to disappointment and hurt. I tried my best to be strong for myself and focused all my energy on getting good grades so I could escape my dad's house. In the end, all the hard work, perseverance, and determination I poured into my studies finally paid off. I remember the moment I received my acceptance letter to a top university, complete with a full scholarship. It was a mix of relief and pride. I was finally getting out of the house, away from my dad's oppressive grip, and stepping into a new chapter of my life where I could live on my own terms. Leaving home felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. Those 4 years in college were some of the best days of my life. It was a period of self-discovery, growth, and joy. I could finally live like a normal young adult, experiencing all the things that had been out of reach for so long. My dad no longer had control over me, although he tried to extend his influence even from afar, but I didn't listen to him anymore. I had spent enough of my life under his thumb, and now it was my time to make my own decisions, to carve out the life I wanted for myself. Despite all the newfound freedom and the fun of college life, I didn't lose sight of my goals. I kept my grades up, determined to make the most of the opportunity one had worked so hard to earn. But I also made sure to enjoy myself and experience everything college had to offer. I went to parties, joined clubs, made new friends, pursued my hobbies, and finally started living life the way I had always imagined it could be. It was during this time that I met my girlfriend, Sheila. Meeting her was one of the most unexpected yet wonderful things that happened to me in college. From the very beginning, there was something about Sheila that drew me in. We're both incredibly similar. Ambitious, driven, and focused on building our careers. But beyond that, what really made our relationship special was the way we connected on a deeper level. Sheila understood me in a way that no one else ever had. One of the things I love most about her is how we can just sit together for hours without the need to fill the silence with words. She allows me to be lost in my thoughts, something that's incredibly rare to find in a relationship. With Sheila, I never feel pressured to be anything other than myself. We enjoy each other's company, whether we're talking about our dreams and goals or simply sitting side by side, comfortable in our silence. Sheila was the first person in my life who truly made me feel like I didn't have to carry the weight of guilt that I had been dragging around for so many years. She saw right through the pain that I had been living with, the pain that had become such a constant presence in my life that I almost didn't recognize it as abnormal. Sheila pointed out how deeply wrong it was for my dad to have blamed me for my mom's death and how no child should have to bear such a burden. She encouraged me to seek therapy, something that up until then, I had never really considered. My dad's words were so deeply ingrained in my mind that I didn't even realize there was a way to escape from their influence. Going to therapy was one of the most transformative experiences of my life. It wasn't easy at first. Confronting the reality of my upbringing, acknowledging the trauma I had endured, and learning to dismantle the toxic beliefs I had internalized took a lot of courage and effort. But therapy opened my eyes in a way nothing else had. It allowed me to understand just how flawed my dad's thinking was and how much I deserved better. I slowly learned that I wasn't to blame for my mom's death and that my dad's anger and bitterness were his issues to deal with, not mine. As I started to heal, I remember I found myself growing angrier at my dad. It was like all the resentment I had buried deep inside me was finally coming to the surface. I had spent so many years trying to earn his approval, trying to be the child he wanted me to be, all while carrying the guilt he had placed on my shoulders. But now, I was realizing that none of that was my responsibility and that he had unfairly and cruelly burdened me with his grief and anger. This anger made it difficult for me to maintain any kind of relationship with him. During my college years, I hardly talked to him, and when I did, our conversations were short and tense. I would snap at him, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice, and I had little patience for his attempts to control or criticize me. There was one time when I finally confronted him about everything. It wasn't something I had planned. It just came out in a moment of frustration and pent-up emotion. I told him about all the years he had blamed me for my mom's death, how his words and actions had deeply impacted my mental health, and how I wasn't going to let him do that to me anymore. I made it clear that I was done being his scapegoat and that I deserved to be treated with respect and dignity. Otherwise, I would cut him off permanently from my life. For once, he didn't have anything to say. He didn't apologize, which I had hoped for, but he also didn't deny what I was saying. After that conversation, I noticed a change in the way my dad interacted with me. He seemed to try to be gentler, less harsh whenever he talked to me. It was as if he was making an effort to change, to be more considerate of my feelings. But despite this, our relationship remained strained. The years of pain and resentment couldn't just be erased with this. I appreciated the small shift in his behavior, but the damage he had done would take more than that to repair the relationship, if it could be repaired at all. Over the years, even though my relationship with my dad has remained sour, I no longer feel the same level of anger or guilt that I once did. I have slowly come to terms with the fact that while I can't change the past, I can control how I let it affect my future. Of course, Sheila's support and encouragement have played a huge role in this journey, and I'm incredibly grateful to her for helping me see that I am worthy of love, respect, and happiness. Recently, my dad got married to his girlfriend, Day. It was a small, intimate wedding, and despite everything that had happened between us over the years, I decided to attend the event along with my girlfriend, Sheila. We wanted to show our support and wish them the best as they started this new chapter of their lives together. I was happy for my dad and thought that perhaps being married now would change him for the better. However, just a month after they got married, my dad called me, sounding desperate. He had made some poor financial decisions and was struggling to make ends meet. He told me how he hadn't been able to pay the rent on his place for the past 6 months, and now he was facing eviction. He told me that he couldn't tell his wife about this as it would start a fight between them. The first thing he asked was if I could cover his rent. Hearing this, I immediately refused. Even though I had the means to do it, I didn't want to be used as a financial safety net, especially given our complicated history. I've worked hard to build the life I have, and I didn't want to set a precedent where he could turn to me for money whenever things went wrong. But after I talked it over with Sheila, I started to feel guilty. I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I was being too harsh, that despite everything, he was still my dad and maybe he genuinely needed help. So I called my dad back and offered him a compromise. I told him that while I wasn't willing to pay his rent, I would let him and Day stay with me temporarily since I lived in my house all on my own and had plenty of space for the both of them. I told them that they could live at my place until they managed to save enough money to get back on their feet and find a new place. It wasn't an easy decision, given everything that had happened between us in the past, but I felt it was the right thing to do. I made it clear that this arrangement was temporary and that I expected him to work toward getting back on his feet. My dad took some time to think about my offer, but he eventually called back and agreed to the arrangement. Within 2 weeks, he and Day moved into my place, and I set up a guest room for them. The first month or so was a period of adjustment for all of us. It had been years since I had lived with my dad, and we were both very different people now. I was no longer the teenager who had to silently endure his criticisms. I was an adult with my own life, habits, and routines. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for his old patterns to resurface. My dad started commenting on my lifestyle and habits as if nothing had changed. Whether it was the way I spent my time, the way I kept the house, or even the way I managed my day-to-day life, he seemed to always have something to say. But I wasn't the same person I used to be. This time, I wasn't willing to let him have that kind of power over me. Whenever he would start criticizing or trying to control aspects of my life, I would stand my ground and tell him to stop. I would make it clear that he had no right to comment on my choices, especially while living under my roof. I wasn't loud about it, but I was firm. I wasn't going to let him dictate how I should live my life. Not anymore. Of course, this didn't sit well with his wife, Day. Once or twice, she made comments about how I needed to respect my dad. She would tell me how he had sacrificed so much. I would simply shake my head because I knew the truth about him, and it was clear that she didn't know about half of the things that he put me through as a child. I did respect my dad, but I wasn't going to allow him to walk all over me or let him undermine my choices. I had spent too much of my life trying to please my dad at the expense of my own happiness, and I wasn't about to fall back into that pattern. Still, it wasn't my place to tell the truth about my dad today, so I would just keep my mouth shut whenever she made those remarks. It wasn't worth getting into an argument over. I knew that living together was going to be challenging, but I hoped that with time, we could all find a way to coexist without too much friction. But then, one evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find my dad sitting in the living room, watching TV with his wife. The house was a mess, and there were dishes piled up in the kitchen. I asked my dad why he hadn't cleaned up since I had told him, and his wife repeatedly that they needed to pick up their share of the household duties and it was his day to clean. You know, he started in that familiar tone that always set my teeth on edge. You're a grown-ass adult who I raised single-handedly after your mom passed away. You should feel ashamed for even asking me to do more work for you at this age. You can wash the dishes yourself. I was so pissed hearing those words that I shot back, saying, "You know what's really embarrassing? The fact that you're sitting here on my sofa, in my house, watching my TV, eating my food, and ordering me around when you were the one who begged me to move in for free. You and your wife have done nothing to help me out this whole time. Guess what? If you don't feel like doing the dishes, then you can just pack your bags and leave any time." My dad just stared at me, taken aback by the force of my response. There was a tense silence, and for a moment, I thought he might actually get up and storm out. However, I knew he had nowhere to go, so I turned and walked out of the room, slamming the door to the kitchen behind me, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and frustration. The next morning, I went downstairs and found myself alone in the kitchen with Day. My dad had likely left early for work. As I was about to exit the kitchen, Day asked if she could talk with me. I wasn't entirely sure what to expect, but I agreed to sit down and listen. With a serious expression, Day began to tell me how hurt my dad was after our conversation the previous night. She said that I had no right to treat him that way, especially considering how much money he had supposedly spent to help me buy my house. Naturally, I was taken aback. My dad hadn't given me any financial support since I left for college. I had bought this house with my own money that I had saved diligently for years. The claim that he had contributed significantly to my purchase was completely unfounded. I asked Day to clarify what she meant, and she explained that my dad had told her he had used some of his savings to help me buy the house. It was as if a light bulb had gone off, and I almost found it amusing that this was the narrative my dad had fed her. Before I could respond, Day continued to insist that I should be grateful for the help my dad had supposedly given me. She felt that given his financial struggles, it was only fair for me to start repaying some of that money back to him by paying rent to them while they stayed with me, since this was basically my dad's house also. Her argument was that it was the least I could do considering the financial sacrifices my dad had supposedly made for me. I stared at her face and couldn't help it anymore. I started laughing at Day. I mean, the whole thing was so absurd that I couldn't take it seriously. When I finally managed to stop laughing, I told her the truth, that I was the actual owner of the house and Dad had not paid for a dime. The look on her face was priceless. It was clear that she had no idea that I owned the house, and the embarrassment and anger she felt must have been overwhelming. She asked me if it was really true that my dad had never helped me out, and I told her how my dad didn't even have money to pay for his own rent. So how could he ever afford to pay for my house? I guess after our talk, she must have seen the truth since she didn't argue much. However, not long after, she packed up her things and left my place that very same day. I didn't stop her because it was none of my business. Later in the evening, when my dad came back home, he called Day, asking her about why her things were gone. When he found out that I had told her the truth about the ownership of the house, he started to blame me for not keeping my mouth shut. He accused me of making his wife uncomfortable and of deliberately sabotaging their relationship by spilling the truth. According to him, I should have been more understanding and should have let her believe his lie, since now he felt too small compared to me, as if somehow it was my fault that he couldn't afford a place of his own. It was frustrating beyond belief. I pointed out to him that here I was, offering my home to help them out, and instead of gratitude, I was being blamed for their problems. My dad seemed to forget that I didn't owe him anything and that the only person to blame here was himself. It was like all those years of him treating me like I was the problem had come rushing back. And now, even as an adult, he was trying to make me the scapegoat for something that wasn't my fault. But he wouldn't listen. Instead of understanding my perspective, he insisted that I should call and apologize today and clear things up by lying and letting her believe that he had somehow helped me during the purchase of this house. I argued back that I was not going to lie for him to his wife. I was exhausted from the constant manipulation and blame, and I had reached my limit. Finally, I told my dad that I couldn't handle having him around any longer, as his constant fights with me were starting to affect my mental health. I asked him to pack up his things and move out by the next day. It was a decision I made with a heavy heart, but I needed to establish and maintain boundaries to protect my own peace and sanity. My dad did argue that he didn't have a place to go and pleaded for more time, but at that moment, I couldn't bring myself to care about his excuses or his situation any longer. I stuck to my decision and made my dad move out the next morning. Ever since then, my dad has been reaching out to me and complaining about how I have ruined his life and his marriage since Day refuses to talk to him. He keeps blaming me for how things are with Day and says that a good son would have never kicked their parents out. ITA for kicking out my dad? Date 1. I am glad that everyone understands just how much trauma my dad has put me through over the years. A lot of people have advised me to contact Day and share the truth about my childhood, as she might not be fully aware of who my dad really is. Until now, I preferred to stay out of his business, but I believe it's important for her to know the reality since he might have lied to her about other things. I plan on reaching out to her and having a one-on-one conversation. Update 2. It's been a week since I last updated. I finally had a chance to sit down with Day and discuss everything. Turns out she had no idea about the kind of childhood I had. I shared with her the blame and emotional trauma I went through and how it affected me. She seemed shocked and admitted that Dad had painted a completely different picture, portraying himself as a struggling single father who had sacrificed everything for his child. I couldn't help but shake my head in disbelief. I recounted stories from my childhood and how I was constantly blamed for my mom's passing. She expressed her sympathy and understanding. Next, I explained to her how hard I worked throughout college to establish myself and how fortunate I was to land a high-paying job. This allowed me to save money and move into a place of my own. I told her that this is why I didn't like Dad dictating anything around my place since he never allowed me to be myself in his house while growing up. Day understood my pain. She then revealed that Dad had actually lost all his money due to gambling, and she had not mentioned it to me earlier because he was too ashamed about it and wanted to keep it hidden. She explained that when my dad first suggested moving into my place, she had outright refused. She wasn't comfortable with the idea of moving in with me, and I guess this is why my dad had lied to her and told her that he had financially contributed to my home, which made her feel less guilty about accepting the offer to stay with us. However, later, when she found out from me that his claims about helping with my house were entirely fabricated and were just another manipulation tactic to get what he wanted, she felt devastated. She then told me how embarrassed she was about asking me for rent that day. I reassured her that it wasn't her fault and that the blame was completely on Dad for his lies. As we were parting ways, Day mentioned that after our conversation, she was planning to take some time off from Dad to reflect on their relationship. Update 3. Hi everyone. I know I haven't updated anything here for the past 3 months. I have completely cut off my dad from my life since I asked him to move out. It hasn't been an easy choice, but it is necessary for my mental and emotional health. The last time we spoke, he tried to blame me for everything again, but I didn't engage anymore. I straight away just blocked him. Since then, I have to admit that I have been feeling much better. The stress and manipulation have lifted, and I'm experiencing a sense of relief and clarity. It feels like I've finally reclaimed my space and peace of mind. My girlfriend, Sheila, has been incredibly supportive throughout this process. She's been there for me, offering comfort and encouragement and helping me work through my emotions. Her support has made a huge difference, and I'm really grateful for her. With my dad out of the picture and Sheila by my side, I'm slowly finding a new sense of stability and happiness. I'm focusing on building the life I want, pursuing my goals, and enjoying the positive aspects of my relationship. Now on to the next story. Story 8. Parents kicked me out so my brother and his pregnant GF could turn my room into a nursery, and claimed I had been freeloading even though I had been paying rent. I come from a lower-income class family where my life was anything but easy growing up. Me and my brother, Kevin, didn't have much at all. My dad worked in a factory, and whatever money he earned was often swallowed up by his addiction to drugs. My mom, on the other hand, worked as a cashier. Her job didn't bring in much, and she had to deal with a lot of rude customers, so she would frequently smoke weed or get drunk every night. As you can probably imagine, the little money that came into our household was spent on their expensive and destructive habits rather than on taking care of me and my brother. Life at home was rough. We never had proper food in the house. There were days when our cupboards were practically bare, and we had nothing to eat. Clean clothes were a luxury we rarely had. Our beds were just old, dirty mattresses thrown on the floor, and the little furniture we did have was either thrifted or picked up from someone's backyard after it had been thrown away. It wasn't uncommon for us to go without basic necessities, and the house often felt more like a place of survival than a home. If you are wondering why CPS was never contacted, it's because even the town we lived in wasn't much better. It was the kind of place where parents neglecting their kids was almost normal, so my brother and I didn't really have a way out. We were surrounded by families who were just as lost in their own struggles, and it seemed like no one really cared about their kids. My parents certainly didn't. They never bothered to check on us if we went to school every day, let alone how we were doing in our classes. It was as if our education, our future, just didn't matter to them. They did not care if we had any dinner before going to sleep or if we needed any medication when we fell ill. Mom and Dad also had a lot of arguments, and those arguments could sometimes turn violent. During those times, I would hide in my room, trying to escape the yelling and the crashing sounds that came from downstairs. During those dark moments, Kevin would often come into my room. We would sit together and put on music, turning up the volume just loud enough to drown out the shouting and lose ourselves in the songs. It was our way of coping, a small escape from the reality of our lives. This neglect by our parents took its toll on me and my brother. We learned to rely on each other a lot and to fend for ourselves. Kevin was always the one who tried to keep me focused on the future, even when our present was so difficult. He used to tell me to keep my head down and study hard, reminding me that if I worked for it, I could grow up and create a different life for myself, far away from the struggles we were living through. Kevin was also more academically inclined than I was, and he always seemed to have a clear plan in his mind. He would talk about his dream of going to college and making something of himself, breaking free from the cycle that our parents were trapped in. Over the years, as Kevin started excelling more and more in his studies at school, something unexpected happened. People in our church began to notice and would often come up to my parents, telling them how well their son was doing. For a family like ours, where academics had never been a focus and where our parents had never shown any real interest in our schooling, this sudden attention was a big deal. It was almost as if a light bulb went off in our parents' heads. They realized that for the first time in their lives they had something to brag about, and that something was my brother, Kevin. This was when the favoritism began. My parents, who had never cared enough to ask about our grades, or whether we even went to school, suddenly started taking notice of Kevin's achievements. They quickly latched onto his success, parading it around to our relatives and neighbors like it was their own accomplishment. They acted like Kevin was their prized possession, showing him off to anyone who would listen. They would go on and on about how well their son was doing, almost as if his achievements could somehow wash away the reputation of their years of neglect. Kevin, of course, started enjoying the attention. I couldn't blame him for that. For the first time, both of our parents were actually interested in his life, and they were proud of him in a way that they had never been before. It was a stark contrast to the way things had always been, and I understood why he would soak it all in. After years of being ignored or dismissed, having our parents finally take an interest in him must have felt like a breath of fresh air. But what started as pride in Kevin's achievements quickly turned into my parents comparing me with him. My mother, in particular, began to taunt me if my grades weren't as good as Kevin's. She would tell me how I needed to work harder and how I should be more disciplined and study like him. No matter how much I tried to explain that I was doing my best, it was never enough for her. It didn't stop at just grades either. Whenever I wanted to stay after school to play basketball with my friends and just relax, my parents suddenly had a problem with it. They would tell me to come home immediately and start working on my assignments, insisting that I needed to focus on my studies if I ever hoped to keep up with their darling Kevin. The pressure to live up to the expectations they had suddenly placed on me was overwhelming, and the joy I once found in things like basketball, music, or even just spending time with friends was being slowly erased by their constant demands for more, for better. As you can imagine, being constantly compared to my brother started to wear me down. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself that it wasn't really Kevin's fault, because I knew he wasn't the one who had created the situation. But over time, things began to shift. The more attention Kevin got, the more he seemed to enjoy it, and that enjoyment started to change him. It wasn't long before he stopped spending time with me or standing by my side, even if I had any legitimate complaints about our parents. Instead of supporting me like he used to, he began to echo their sentiments, telling me that I was overreacting, that I should stop complaining about them, and that our parents weren't as bad as I made them out to be. Hearing this from Kevin, the one person who used to understand and support me, made me start to doubt myself. I began to wonder if maybe he was right, if I really was just overthinking everything. But slowly and slowly, the blatant favoritism of my parents towards Kevin became even more clearer. For example, whenever my dad received his salary, Kevin would go to him and talk about how he needed new books and pens for school. Without hesitation, my dad would hand him money to buy any school supplies he needed. But when I would ask for the same things, my dad would refuse. He'd say that I could use Kevin's old, worn-out books or discarded supplies instead. If I protested about how unfair this was, he would argue that he didn't have enough money for both of us and Kevin needed to be looked after more than me. It wasn't just about school supplies, either. My mom suddenly had an interest in cooking meals for my brother, and she would only make meals that he liked. It didn't matter if I liked or disliked the food. What mattered was that it pleased my brother. It was incredibly frustrating and hurtful to be told that my needs were less important simply because I wasn't Kevin. These small gestures kept adding up, each one a constant reminder to me that Kevin was the one who mattered more in our parents' eyes. Meanwhile, Kevin was also beginning to believe that he was somehow more deserving of it, and didn't protest against the favoritism, and that realization hurt more than anything else. It felt like I was losing my brother, the person who was always there for me, and with Kevin no longer on my side, I felt completely alone in my struggles. The one strong bond we shared was breaking down, replaced by a growing resentment and sadness that I didn't know how to cope with. When Kevin got accepted into a good college with a full scholarship because of his academic achievements, I was genuinely happy for him. It was a moment of pride for our family, and I was excited to see him finally get the recognition he deserved. My parents, eager to celebrate Kevin's success, decided to take him out for a special dinner. It was a big deal for them, a chance to show him how proud they were. I remember asking if I could join, wanting to be part of the celebration, but they told me this dinner was just for Kevin. It stung to hear that, and what hurt even more was that Kevin didn't say anything in my defense. He didn't suggest that I should come along or make any effort to include me. I waited, hoping he would speak up for me like he used to, but he stayed silent. It was at that moment that I realized that Kevin clearly liked being the center of attention and I wasn't a priority in his life anymore. I didn't want to fight with them and spoil his night, so I let my brother and my parents have a good time on their own. Days later, when Kevin finally moved out to start college, the house felt strange and empty. Now that it was just me and my parents, the dynamic shifted back to what it had been before Kevin started to excel, except this time it felt even worse. My parents, who had been so full of pride and energy when talking about Kevin, went back to ignoring me just as they had before Kevin became their golden child. Without him around, they no longer had anything to brag about to their neighbors, and their interest in my life dwindled to nothing. The only time I heard any excitement in their voices was whenever Kevin called them from college. If the phone rang and it was Kevin on the other end, their eyes would light up. They'd suddenly become animated, eager to hear about his college life, his classes, and his friends. It was like he was the sun and they revolved around him. If I tried to engage with my parents about my life at school, they would simply nod but not really seem interested or ask any questions. Even when I worked hard and started getting better grades, they would tell me how Kevin had scored better than me at my age, so I still wasn't doing enough. As if all wasn't hurtful enough, once I even overheard my parents talking in the living room about how relieved they were to have given birth to at least one child who was extraordinary. Hearing this felt like a punch to the gut. My dad remarked how my mom should have stopped getting pregnant after Kevin and that if they hadn't had me, they could have given my brother a much more comfortable life. Those words shattered me. I had always known deep down that my parents favored Kevin, but to hear them speak so bluntly about how they wished I hadn't been born, it was unbearable. Was I really just an ordinary kid? Was I worth nothing to my parents? Their words made me feel like I was invisible, like I didn't matter at all. I started to wonder if all the things I had believed about myself were wrong, if maybe I really wasn't good enough, smart enough, or special enough to deserve their love. Living with that kind of doubt was suffocating. I started to feel like no matter what I did, I would never measure up to Kevin. It's a hard thing to carry that kind of pain, and it left me feeling lost and alone in a way that I had never felt before. Luckily, during this difficult time, I met my current boyfriend, Nate. We were introduced through mutual friends. I remember one of the first things he ever said to me when we met was how beautiful but sad my eyes looked. That comment struck me because it felt like he could see something in me that most people overlooked. It was like he could see past the surface and understand the pain that I carried around with me. Nate came from a slightly better neighborhood than mine, and while our backgrounds were different, we quickly found common ground. What began as casual hangouts slowly turned into something more meaningful. Eventually, we went out on a date, just the two of us, and it was clear that we had something special. Our chemistry was undeniable. It felt like we just clicked in a way that I hadn't experienced before. Nate is my first real boyfriend, and while I know people often say that young love doesn't last, I can't help but hope that ours will be the exception. He's become such an important part of my life, and I really believe we have something worth holding on to. My boyfriend has played a huge role in helping me climb out of the dark place I was once in due to my parents' neglect. He's listened to me for hours, patiently hearing me out as I have talked about my family, my struggles, and the grief that I've carried for so long. He has never made me feel like my pain was too much or that I was a burden. With Nate, I found a sense of hope and happiness that I didn't think was possible. This is how I got the motivation I needed to start working harder at school to improve my grades and even started doing part-time jobs just so I could save money and eventually move out of my parents' home. I knew that my struggle was long, but at least I had some kind of hope because of Nate. However, when I turned 18, life became even more difficult for me. My parents informed me that it was time for me to start paying rent to them. They had already noticed that I had been saving money from working at various part-time jobs over the years, and it seemed they now wanted a share of that money since I was legally an adult and they didn't have to support me. I tried to explain to them that I was still in the process of applying to colleges and that I was waiting to hear back from a few of them. Moving out was on my horizon, and I urged them to let me stay rent-free until then, but they wouldn't budge. They were adamant that they were done raising me and made it clear that if I wasn't going to start paying rent, then I needed to move out. I cried a lot over this because it felt so unfair. My brother, Kevin, had never been asked to pay rent after he turned 18, not even when he was living at home before heading off to college. This was just another reminder of the blatant favoritism that had always existed in my family. I felt betrayed. In the midst of all this, Nate suggested that I move in with him, explaining that his parents were okay with us living together. It was such a kind and generous offer, and it made me feel incredibly supported. But as much as I appreciated it, I wasn't ready. Moving in together felt like a huge step, and with everything that was happening, it seemed too soon, too rushed. I didn't want to jeopardize our relationship by moving in together before we were both ready, so I had to decline his offer. In the end, I had no choice but to start paying rent to my parents. It felt like a bitter pill to swallow, knowing that the very people who were supposed to support me were now demanding money from me instead. On top of the rent, I often found myself helping out with groceries and other bills around the house when they couldn't afford to pay them. Sometimes my dad would purposely delay paying these bills, using his money on drugs instead, just so he could turn around and ask me to cover the costs. It was clearly a manipulative move, and it hurt to see how little he cared about the burden he was placing on me. But I kept my mouth shut and did what they asked. I didn't want to start a fight with them, and I was afraid of the consequences if I refused. 3 months ago, Kevin called our family with some unexpected news. His girlfriend was pregnant. This came as a huge shock, especially since Kevin had only been dating this woman for a few months. This was a curveball none of us saw coming. Kevin was clearly stressed and desperate when he called. He explained that his girlfriend came from a very strict family that didn't support the idea of women getting pregnant before marriage. This is why his girlfriend needed a place to stay in peace during her pregnancy, and because house rents were already too high, he wanted to move back in with his girlfriend. Kevin also explained that he wanted to save money for raising his child instead of spending it all on rent and bills. He framed it as a temporary situation, only just until they could get on their feet and figure out a more permanent living arrangement. To my surprise, my parents wholeheartedly agreed to his request without even discussing it with me. I couldn't help but feel a bit confused and, to be honest, frustrated by their eagerness to accommodate him. After all, our house wasn't exactly spacious, and the idea of Kevin, his girlfriend, and their baby cramming into his old room seemed impractical, if not impossible. However, after the conversation with Kevin, the very next day my parents sat me down to discuss how since Kevin and his girlfriend were moving in, they felt it was time for me to leave their house. I was taken aback and couldn't believe what I was hearing. When I asked them why, my dad casually remarked that they needed to convert my room into a nursery for the baby. I tried to argue with them, explaining how unfair this was. I pointed out that I had nowhere to go and Kevin, as an adult, should be able to adjust to the situation without taking over my space. But my parents were unmoved. They instead accused me of being selfish and a freeloader, telling me that this was about their grandchild and that I needed to stop arguing with them. It didn't matter to them that I was paying rent every month or that I was still trying to figure out my future. All they cared about was helping Kevin and making sure the baby had a room. My mom coldly informed me that I had just 1 week to pack up and move out. This time, since I had no other options left, I had to accept Nate's offer to move in with him. Of course, Nate was incredibly supportive, helping me pack up my belongings and move them into his truck. But as I packed, I couldn't hold back the tears. Despite everything, that house, especially my room, had been my sanctuary for so many years. It was the one place where I had grown up, where I had cried myself to sleep, where I had dreamed of a better life. Even though I hated so much about that house, losing my room felt like losing the last bit of stability I had. However, I had no other choice. Moving in with Nate was a big step, and at first it wasn't easy for me to adjust. Nate's parents knew about my situation and seemed to genuinely feel bad for what I had been through. They tried to make me feel at home, and I appreciated their efforts, but it was still a difficult transition. Meanwhile, Kevin and his girlfriend moved into our parents' house just as planned. Kevin called me only once after the move, probably out of obligation more than anything else. He asked me where I had gone, and I told him how our parents had essentially kicked me out to make room for him and his new family. I expected him to be surprised or at least concerned, but instead, he tried to downplay the situation. He suggested that what had happened was just a small sacrifice for the sake of his family, as if being forced out of my home was no big deal. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I pointed out how differently our parents had treated us over the years, how they had always favored him and ignored me, especially now. But instead of understanding, Kevin just accused me of being jealous and even told me to grow up, saying that I needed to stop being childish. That was the moment when I realized that any hope of having a normal relationship with him was gone. I had been holding on to the idea that maybe deep down he still cared about me as his sister, but his reaction made it clear that I was on my own. I decided then and there that I was done with him and with our parents too. If they wanted to live happily ever after with their golden child and his girlfriend, then I wasn't going to stand in their way. I needed to move on and start focusing on myself once and for all, even if it meant cutting ties with them altogether. It's been 3 months since I moved in with Nate, and things have started to fall into place. Life has become a lot more stable, and I've started to settle into a routine living with him. Throughout all of this time, my parents have never once reached out to me. They haven't called to check on me to see if I was okay, or to ask how I've been doing. Hence, today, out of nowhere, when I received a call from my mother, I had no intention of answering. Later, during my lunch break, I saw several missed calls from both my parents and felt a pang of worry. I decided to call them back, and when I did, my dad informed me that Kevin and his girlfriend had apparently moved out of my parents' house secretly the previous night, and they had just discovered it this morning. I was taken aback and asked for more details. It turns out that my parents had initially been open to the idea of Kevin and his girlfriend moving in, but they hadn't anticipated how financially draining it was going to be. Kevin's girlfriend, who was pregnant, had a big appetite due to her pregnancy, and my dad complained that she would eat up everything. My parents had not expected how expensive it would be to completely provide for an extra 2 adults in the house. When the bills started piling up, my parents asked Kevin and his girlfriend to contribute to the grocery bills and other expenses, but Kevin and his girlfriend refused. They argued that it wasn't fair to expect them to pay for anything, especially since the terms had not been discussed beforehand. They had moved in with the expectation that they would live there rent-free and without having to pay any bills. When my parents pointed out that they were struggling to manage expenses for everyone, Kevin tried to reason with my parents that as their son, they should be helping him out without any complaints. Apparently, the fight between the 4 of them escalated, and my mom, in a fit of anger, called Kevin's girlfriend a gold digger for staying with them for free. This apparently has led to Kevin and his girlfriend moving out. Kevin even left a note saying that he was done with my parents forever. Since then, my mom has tried to get in touch with him and his girlfriend to apologize, but they have ignored all her calls. Amidst this chaos, my dad decided to reach out to me for help. He asked if I could get in touch with Kevin to check on him and see how he was doing. I told him that I would try my best since even me and my brother were not on exactly good terms. But then my dad made a shocking request. He told me that he and my mom had discussed, and they wanted me to come back home. Curiously, I asked him why they would want that since they had just kicked me out 3 months ago. My dad pointed out that if I moved back in, I could start paying them rent, which would help them manage the expenses and take care of Kevin and his girlfriend for free. In this way, they would not have to pay for anything. Dad even had the audacity to suggest that I could just sleep on the couch in the living room since my old room had already been converted into a nursery. When I heard this, I just shook my head at the absurdity of it all. After being kicked out of the house to make space for Kevin and his new family, my parents now wanted me to come back, pay rent, and essentially live on the couch. I was so pissed that I told my dad outright that I would never be moving back in with him. I told him that he and my mom deserved to be cut off from their children, and they should be ashamed of themselves for even suggesting to me something as ridiculous as this. Am I the asshole for refusing to move back in with my parents? Update 1. I'm pleased that everyone sees that I'm not the one to be blamed and finds my parents' sense of entitlement amusing. I am glad that I have Nate with me because I don't know what I would have done had he not been in my life. After the conversation with my dad, I did call Kevin to check in with him since I was worried. He has texted me saying he's busy right now but will call me back soon, so I will update here once I have had a talk with him. Update 2. So I spoke with my brother and discovered there were additional issues between my mom and his girlfriend that my dad hadn't mentioned earlier. It turns out that my mom would criticize Kevin's girlfriend constantly, making derogatory comments about her appearance. She would interfere with how the nursery should look and what baby clothes to buy. Our parents even had an argument with Kevin and his girlfriend over the name they had picked for their baby. Our parents thought it was too simple and insisted they pick a name from my father's side of the family. When Kevin's girlfriend refused, my mom yelled at her, saying she should be more respectful and learn to make decisions with the family. Hence, when the big fight occurred, Kevin felt it was crucial for him and his girlfriend to move out immediately for her mental well-being. They're currently staying at one of his friends' places, and Kevin assured me that they're managing. He also admitted that I was right about our parents' mistreatment all along and apologized to me, saying he should have listened to me sooner. I will admit I did feel a bit better hearing my brother say that. However, I don't think that just one apology is going to fix everything. The only reason my brother finally saw the truth was because our parents treated his girlfriend the same toxic way they would always treat me. Update 3. Thank you all for supporting me over the past few months. I am thrilled to share that my admission to a local college has been finally confirmed. Nate and I are excited to start this new chapter together. Thanks to him, I've managed to save up a significant amount of money, so I'm now planning to move into a small apartment with a roommate. For everyone asking, Kevin and his girlfriend are doing well. My relationship with my brother has also improved significantly since we both decided to cut off our parents. Today, I feel grateful that my parents kicked me out for my brother. It gave me the push I very much needed to get away from them and focus more on doing something for myself. Now on to the next story. Story 9. I found a tampon in my husband's car, then another in our bedroom. Our toddler suddenly had new clothes I didn't buy, so I finally thought he was cheating. I, 29F, have been with my husband, 30M, for 7 years. Married for 4. I've never had reason to suspect he was unfaithful to me or even remotely dissatisfied with our marriage. He likes to joke that we're still living the honeymoon phase nearly 5 years and 2 kids in. I wouldn't have questioned that or him were it not for a surprise I found in his car last month. When buckling our daughter into her car seat, I noticed something slotted between the cushions. I pulled it out and saw that it was a tampon. This wouldn't have been so unusual had I not had an IUD that has stopped my period for the past year. And I didn't even recognize the wrapper style. I brought it to my husband's attention, and he didn't seem to understand what it was, let alone why I was holding it until I told him where I'd found it and why I was almost certain it wasn't mine. He shrugged and said it probably belonged to his coworker, Fiona. It's not uncommon for my husband to carpool to lunch with his coworkers. And we're both fairly close to Fiona and her husband, so I figured it was entirely possible the tampon had slipped out of her purse whenever he had driven with them or offered her a ride. No big deal. I put it out of my mind until we had dinner with Fiona and her husband a couple of weeks later. I had sincerely wanted to believe my husband, but I just couldn't get over the way it had been tucked in the seat and how my husband had seemed not to have any regard for it whatsoever. Maybe playing dumb, I don't know. I did something that I now feel kind of crazy for doing. I faked an emergency and asked Fiona if she had any tampons while we were out together. She handed me one, almost identical to the tampon I'd found in our back seat, and I breathed a sigh of relief. So the tampon there was probably the same tampon here, and in all likelihood, there was an innocent explanation as to why it had been left in the back seat in the first place. I thought I'd seen the last of the out-of-place feminine hygiene products until I found another tampon this morning, this time in my sock drawer. I feel physically ill at the thought of my husband having an affair, and even more nauseated at the thought that the woman might have left these tampons out for me to find. If it was my husband's coworker, why would she give herself away by offering me one the other night? In any other situation, I would want to talk to my husband about this, but I feel too sick and embarrassed to approach him with what I found. What should I do? Comments. I've had a period 30 years and never put a tampon in a sock drawer. Trust your gut and get cameras. Neither have I. I've considered so many explanations for the tampons that wouldn't implicate my husband, but none of them make sense. Really. I'm terrified to set up a camera if it means confirming what I suspect. Has Fiona been over to your house and had time to plant the tampon? She's been to our house many times and vice versa. To my knowledge, she wasn't over any time in the past week. So if she planted that second tampon, she had to have found a window of time when I wasn't home. Anytime she and her husband visit, we all stay downstairs and you'd have to go really out of your way to make it to our bedroom, i.e. around our dogs, over the safety gate, past the other bedrooms. Not saying it's impossible, but definitely tricky to do on a quick bath break, I would guess. How old are your kids? Could they have found a tampon and put it in a random place? 2 and almost 4. Both have a mischievous streak, so I didn't want to rule out the possibility of one of them moving stuff around. But I can't imagine how they'd get their hands on one. Possibly 2 random tampons that I never bought. Update 1. September 20th, 2023. Contemplating every possible source of 2 tampons has been my personal hell for the past few weeks. But I wanted to share an update. Shortly after posting on here, I told my sister what happened. The tampon in the back seat and the sock drawer, my husband's cluelessness, the tampon from Fiona, and all the things I suspected but didn't want to believe. We compared tampons, save for the back seat one I had already discarded, and they were a match, just in different absorbencies. I hadn't left either in a place where my husband or daughters would have found them and moved them around. My daughters didn't know what they were or where they had come from. My sister was convinced it was Fiona, either fing my husband, fing with me, or both. Direct confrontation of either party still seemed like a bad idea, so she suggested inviting Fiona and her husband over for our Labor Day barbecue. Unfortunately, they already had plans. My sister and I agreed that it was too soon for cameras without any other evidence, so it was just a waiting game from there. Watching my husband for any changed behavior, there was none. Our house for any misplaced/foreign items, there were none. And even the girls for any new friends they might have met. My sister's husband was adamant on this last point, and partly why he was inclined to believe that the tampons were harmless. If anything had been happening in or around our home, he said it would be nearly impossible to keep it from me and the girls since my husband was the one taking them to and from daycare and most other activities during the week. I felt a good bit of consolation in that. It wasn't until my younger daughter, 2 years pro, came down with something last week that I felt any differently. I wanted to be the one home taking care of her, but my husband insisted that I stay at work while he stayed home with her. I was okay with that. My sister and her husband figured it was a good sign that he would take the time off at a moment's notice, and at that point we were all already beginning to put the tampon fiasco behind us. By the 3rd or 4th day, I was just happy to see a near-healthy child and a husband who was helping see her through it. Toward the end of that week, though, I came home to something strange. The toddler that I'd left that morning in an old PJ set was now dressed in a onesie I'd never seen before with a tiny clip in her hair. I can't say I have the sharpest memory, but I have a pretty good sense of what my kids wear on a day-to-day basis and particularly what kinds of clothes they wear. I'd sworn off the full-length sleep suits with snaps across the front long before we'd ever had our second. The long snaps are just a pain in the butt and a no-go for efficient diaper changes. It's just not something I would dress her in, and my husband knows as much. He doesn't plan for or buy the girls' clothes, and he certainly doesn't accessorize them. So I was bewildered and kind of floored at the thought of someone around our sick child without my knowledge. I didn't think twice, and I went straight to my husband to ask if anyone had been over to see him or the girls. He seemed confused like before and asked me why I would think that. It had just been him and the kids all day. I asked him again if someone had so much as stopped by to say hello, and he denied it. He told me to calm down. I might have lashed out and come forward with the accusations right then and there, but our older daughter was in the room and she sensed something was up. In a calmer voice, I asked him a third time if anyone had been around our children, and my husband swore that the girls hadn't been around anyone but him. He also denied buying new clothes or doing anyone's hair. With our daughter in the room and my emotions all over the place, I decided to leave it. I couldn't make sense of it then, and it hardly seems clearer now after I've driven myself half crazy with explanations that aren't adding up. Comments? To answer a couple questions. My 2-year-old can only string together a couple words at a time, and when I asked her about her time with Daddy or her clothes/bow, she answers are based on the cues I give her. For example, "Who gave you that pretty bow?" And she repeats, "Pretty bow," back to me, or "Mama" or "Daddy" over and over. My older daughter, almost 4, was at daycare that morning and she can't recall anything different from that day. Doesn't remember the PJ change or the hair clip. So my guess is she was changed sometime that morning, but I'm not totally sure. I have a 45 minutes commute to work, so stopping by for lunch isn't really feasible. My sister has been kind enough to leave work and drive past a few times here and there, and she hasn't seen anything out of the ordinary. We have a Ring camera at the front door and I've got the app on my phone with not ifs on. Nothing there yet. If anyone has recommendations for more discreet surveillance, I'd be open to it. I'm just the least tech-savvy person and worry another camera will be easy to detect, lol. Edit. And yes, we get our carbon monoxide detectors tested regularly. Is it possible one of the hair clips came from daycare? I could see the hair clip being a possibility, but less likely on the onesie. My younger daughter hadn't been to daycare in days. And if either of them had returned with something like that before, I would have noticed, especially since it was the kind of onesie I hate with a passion, lol. People comment that they can't wait to find out the ending to this saga. My money on the Hollywood horror ending. Hopefully dreamed up the dogs too, so I can finally stop picking up their imaginary shit and whatnot. Update 2, October 6, 2023. After nearly losing my mind over a hair clip and a onesie, I realized I wasn't getting anywhere with the accusations and half-baked guesswork. I'd gotten so absorbed in the paranoia and misery of my situation that I wasn't sleeping, eating, or caring for myself the way I should have been. And I wasn't getting any answers. So I decided to pull the trigger on the hidden cameras and have them shipped to my sister's house, with my bill agreeing to help with the install/setup over at mine. Before the cameras were ever delivered, though, I got my long-awaited confirmation last week. A Ring notification had alerted me to motion at the front door while I was at work. Half expecting to see a delivery person, pet, or lawn care salesman for the 15th time, you can imagine my surprise when I saw a clip of a young woman leading my daughter into the house, hand in hand with my husband and other daughter close behind them. The girls were supposed to be in daycare and my husband at work. The woman, as far as I knew, was living 2 states away with a court order keeping her there. I immediately called my husband to ask him what the EF this woman was doing in our house. He didn't answer, so I texted it to him. Even in his stupidity, he probably realized he had messed up by going through the front door, knew I had gotten the Ring notification, and wanted to delay the inevitable. By the 5th or 6th subsequent call, though, he did pick up. The woman on the camera was my husband's sister. As I would come to find out later, she was the likely source of both tampons, the onesie, and the bow. She is also a registered sex offender and a recovering addict who spent the better part of her adolescence and young adulthood coercing the silence of another one of my husband's family members after she had molested them. I hadn't seen or heard from her in years, and from the way my husband talked about her, I didn't expect I ever would. But here she was in our house with our children. Suffice to say, I was livid. It wasn't an affair at all, and still somehow infinitely more disgusting knowing who it was and why all of this had been happening. Apparently my SIL, fresh off another stint in rehab, had wanted to reconnect and make amends with people she'd hurt, and my husband was high on that list. My husband didn't want me to know, or worse, try and keep her from my family, our children. So they'd been meeting in secret, often at our house when I was at work. They would enter through the garage in my husband's car, so the Ring camera at the front door wouldn't tip me off. She spent the night on a weekend I had been on a business trip and slept in our bed. She babysat our girls on a night my husband told me he had dropped them off at his parents'. She bought the girls' clothes and dressed my youngest in the onesie, and bow that my husband had promised on his life I had dressed her in myself. My husband swore this was all in my head. The tampons, the onesie, the bow, and all the rest. He was perfectly content to watch me agonize for weeks over a woman he insisted didn't exist, shrugging off each progressively more unsettling discovery like it was news to him and telling me I was being irrational. He insinuated that I was experiencing postpartum depression, 2 years after I'd given birth and 4 years after I'd told him that one of my biggest fears for motherhood was to suffer PPD like my mother had with me, to not be fully present for our babies and be left with a world of guilt and regret as they grew older. He told me I wasn't sleeping enough, that I missed the girls too much, that I needed to take a step back and reevaluate the state of my mental health. I gave him the benefit of the doubt because he was my husband and because no other version of events made sense. Now, after a month of this shit show, I have nothing to show for my trust but this pathetic situation and a lot of anger. Comment: call the cops. Get a lawyer. Already on it, believe me. We're going scorched earth with this shit now. Now on to the next story. Story 10. Cheating girlfriend is crying and begging me to come back to her. I, 27M, just found out my partner, 26F, cheated on me. She did it on Saturday night at a party that she was meant to invite me to but didn't. On Sunday, she broke up with me over text. I asked her if she hooked up with anyone the previous night, and she told me, "No, this is why I'm breaking up with you. You never trust me." Which is an absolute lie because I've always trusted her. She wouldn't admit it, no matter how much I begged and told her I knew. She just kept saying, "How do you know? And who told you?" She was far more concerned with how I knew than anything else and believed that she deserved to know that more than I deserved the truth. I asked her why it matters, and she said, because she needs to know which friend is talking behind her back. As if the friend is in the wrong and not her. Her friend had told me, and my ex's words were, "We had sex 7 times over 12 hours and it was literally so amazing. Can't wait to see him again. Give me more footy boys, please. I'm still at this boy's house and I have really bad sex hair right now. Can someone come pick me up?" With a laughing face. When she eventually did admit it, she said that she did nothing wrong because we were on a break, which was a lie. We were on a break in terms of staying at our own houses but not hooking up with other people. She then also told me that it was my fault because I never gave her enough affection, and if I had have given her more reassurance that I loved her, she wouldn't have done it. Another excuse was that she was planning to break up with me anyway, so it doesn't matter, and I said, "Well, you could have waited." And she said, "Well, I wanted to break up with you on Friday night, so I could have just done it then, so it doesn't matter." That's still not okay in my book. I have been completely broken by this. When she eventually did admit it, I asked why she lied on Sunday and told me that I never trust her, as if to make me seem crazy, even when I was right, and blamed the breakup on me. She said that she was trying to protect me. She didn't want to hurt me any further than the breakup. Second part. I'm looking for advice. Her friends have been screenshotting my Tinder profile and sending it to each other. They've told her that they've sent it to each other and they've quoted my bio and said, "How gross, LOL." And she agrees and says that I'm a terrible person and she's glad to be done with me. Weight off her shoulders. Also said, "FCK, her name is back. This hurts me so much. I gave her everything. I was never rude. I literally have done nothing wrong and she is being so rude behind my back." But to my face, she's saying that she's upset about the breakup and struggling a bit, and I'm telling her before I knew she cheated that I still love her and I want the best for her. She says she cares about me and wants to be friends, but is talking massive shit behind my back. How do I deal with this? Not only am I upset about the things that she's saying about me to her friends, I'm also so upset by their comments and it's lowering my self-esteem. Maybe my bio is gross. Maybe I'm gross. I don't know what I did to deserve this, but I can't handle it. On top of this, because I'm on dating apps, she said, "Wow, he moves on quickly. doesn't he? What a piece of shit. Although she cheated on me, so she had moved on quicker, not to mention that she's also on dating apps and within a day was sending nudes and organizing hookups with multiple guys from there. It's just so hypocritical, and she's making me blame myself as well as not accepting any responsibility whatsoever. I don't know how to digest this. I can't stop beating myself up for my actions, thinking if I had have put in effort this wouldn't have happened, or if I had have texted her on Saturday and asked to come to that party it wouldn't have happened, and I keep replaying everything she's done and said in my head. For anyone wondering, one of her friends, who I treated I'm an osteo, has told me this information from their group chat. Update. She now wants to call me again after work. I'm not sure what to do. Before I knew she cheated, I dropped her stuff back off at her place, and I left her a letter full of nice things and memories of our relationship. Everything I was grateful for, and that I wish her the best. She sent me a photo of her crying, saying, "If this doesn't show you how much I care, I don't know what will." I'm not sure if I should let her say her piece, maybe give myself some reassurance and get it all out there, or if I should just not say anything and cut off contact. Advice, please. I'm so tempted to hear what she has to say, but I'm not sure what is the best route to go. I'd like to know what she thought of my letter and if she is really sorry. I don't know. I wouldn't take her back, but I just want to hear it. Is it better to let her dwell on it all? What's the best form of revenge? Now on to the next story. Story 11. My boyfriend and his family seem to think I'll give it to him for free. So, I, 23F, won a brand new compact car in a raffle I entered a few weeks ago at a trade show I was at for work, which is awesome, but I already have an older car that I really like and I just finished paying it off so I can finally pay the cheaper liability-only insurance. My car still has a lot of life on it. It only has about 100k miles, and if I were to choose a brand new car, it would not be the one that I won. I did some research and, after taxes and shipping, I can make about $14,000 to $15,000 from selling the car. That money would be an incredible just start after graduating college. It would more than triple my savings. My boyfriend, 25M, of a little over a year has been without a car for a few months. He's been struggling a bit financially, so he hasn't gotten a new one yet, but he can walk to the grocery store, he gets a ride to work, and I drive anywhere else. This worked out fine and I really don't mind. He helps out with gas and driving. For background, he lives with friends. I live with my dad for free, so I'm able to save up money. I definitely see a future with him, but we aren't at the point where we've talked about moving in together yet, but we are very serious. I went to a gathering at his parents' house last night. His whole family has been wonderful and welcoming to me, and everyone congratulated me on winning the car, but everyone, including my boyfriend, seemed to think the logical and obvious step was to either give it to my boyfriend or give him my car and keep the new one. I don't plan to do either of these things. It would be different if we were married or living together and our money was mixed together. But it's not. We aren't at that point in the relationship yet. I don't want to give him what would essentially be $15,000 in cash. It doesn't make any sense. If I'd won the money instead, there wouldn't be any talk of just giving it all to him. That car and the resulting money should be mine. It's not my responsibility to provide him with a free car, whether it be my $5,000 car that I really like or this brand new one. For the dinner at his family's house, I just stayed quiet because I was so shocked at their assumption and didn't want to rip it away from him in front of his entire extended family. How do I break this to him and his family that this car and the money from it is not in any way his? Update 1. April 14, 2016. I just found out I won a new car in a raffle I entered at a work function. I planned to sell the car to make about $14,000, but at my boyfriend's family gathering, everyone seemed to assume I'd give him the car because he doesn't have one. So, the day after the family gathering where everyone assumed I'd just let my boyfriend use the car for free, I had to drive into the city where I won the car to sign a bunch of paperwork and pay some fees. We both had the day off, so I texted my boyfriend and asked if he'd like to come along, so we could walk around the city and go out to eat afterwards. He agreed and I picked him up. We hadn't talked about the night before at all. He asked general questions about what it was I had to do today and I explained that, and then I explained how the taxes on the car were going to be several thousand, but luckily I could cover them with my savings until I got the money for selling the car, and hopefully it would come out to around $14,000 to $15,000 based on my brother's calculations. He was quiet for a minute and asked, "You don't want to keep it?" And I said no, that I was happy with the older, bigger car I currently have. It better suits our needs and I can pay cheaper insurance on it because it's paid off. He said that he didn't realize the taxes would be so much. It was awkward in the car for a moment, and I finally just asked, "Did your family think I'd give you the car to use?" He said his mom told everyone right before I got there that we, meaning BF and I, won the car and that he'd finally have something to drive. He said that he didn't think I'd do that, but he assumed I'd want to keep the new car simply because it was new and that maybe I'd let him use my old car if he took over the insurance payments. But then he very quickly said that he did not realize the taxes would be more than a few hundred. I guess his train of thought makes sense given what he assumed about the cost. He agreed that it made the most sense to sell the new car. I asked if he was going to explain that to his mother, and he said that he would and that she views the two of us like a married couple already because she wants that so badly for him and has been heavily pressuring him to propose to me. That I did not know. Neither of us are at a point where we're even remotely ready for that. We're happy with where we are right now. He promised he'd talk to his mom and explain everything to his family, and that he wouldn't let any of them think less of me. I was worried about that, so he waited patiently while I dealt with the company running the raffle. It ended up taking over 3 hours, and then we had a nice time strolling around the city, and I treated us to a very nice dinner. Now on to the next story. Story 12. I told my fiancé not to go at a yellow light, but he did anyway, and we got T-boned at 50 miles per hour. Now I have a broken pelvis and spine with steel screws and need a year to recover. I, 26F, my fiancé, 30M, and his son, 5Y, were out getting Chipotle on March 14th. On the way home, we reached a busy intersection with a blinking yellow light. My fiancé was driving, and I could tell he was about to go. I saw a car coming fast, and I very clearly told him to wait until the light was green. I don't know if he didn't hear me, didn't take me seriously, or just ignored me, but he kept driving forward anyway, and we got T-boned by a car going 50 miles per hour. Everyone else walked away fine, including his son, thank God, but I was crushed. I ended up with 2 full breaks in my pelvis, 2 fractures in my tailbone, fractures in my L4 and L5 vertebrae, and a fractured sternum. I was and still am in so much pain. I can't even explain it. I wouldn't wish this kind of pain on anyone. I was rushed to the ER, where everything was a complete blur except the trauma. I started having intense flashbacks, panic attacks, and nightmares about the crash and the pain. I had to undergo surgery where 2 7-inch steel screws were inserted into my pelvis. At the hospital, they gave me a back brace that was way too big for me. The nurses and PTs even admitted they didn't measure and just guessed my size. Even when we told them it was too big, they didn't do anything about it. And despite this, they expected me to stand up and move around wearing it. That brace did nothing for support. Moving in it felt like my spine and pelvis were being ripped apart. The pain I was in trying to follow their orders to stand and walk was inhumane. All I remember from those days is pain, frustration, fear, and this overwhelming sense of helplessness. After about a week, I was transferred to a physical rehabilitation center. I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to bathe. I didn't want to move. I was so depressed and in so much pain that even thinking about shifting in bed made me cry. I had to depend on strangers for the most basic things. Going to the bathroom, bathing, even feeding myself. As someone who's always been independent, it was utterly humiliating and devastating. I'm home now, but my recovery is far from over. Doctors and physical therapists all told me the same thing. You have the second worst kind of break anyone can experience. You'll need at least a year to recover, if not longer. You can't put weight on your right leg for 3 months. No bending, no twisting. And even after the 3 months, it'll be a very slow process. And that's the part that's eating me alive. Because before this, I was finally getting my life together. I was working on my health. I was eating right, doing CrossFit regularly, getting stronger, and finally meeting people and socializing. I had just gone back to college. I was finally building structure into my life after being recently diagnosed with ADHD. And now it's all on hold. I can't work out. I can't leave the house unless it's for a doctor's appointment. I can't do anything by myself. And it feels like I lost everything I was working so hard to build. And even though my fiancé has been supportive through all of this and is helping take care of me, I'm so angry at him. I told him, I warned him. I said, don't go. Wait. And when I asked him why he kept going, he just said, "I don't know." And that "I don't know" is now costing me an entire year of my life, maybe more. And I'm the one who's paying for it every single day. So yeah, I just needed to get this off my chest. I feel trapped in my own body. I feel like I'm grieving the life I could have had this year. I feel angry, sad, helpless, and I'm just trying to make sense of it all. But mostly, I just want my life back. I know this is temporary. I know I'll eventually recover, but losing a year of my life, my sense of normalcy, and my peace of mind is really, really rough. If anyone has any advice on how I can work on this, or maybe even share their own experiences similar to this one, I'd greatly appreciate it. Update: April 4th, 2025. I honestly didn't expect my post to receive this much attention. I was just venting my thoughts and emotions in the moment as I'm still going through the stages of grief. Thank you to everyone who took the time to share their thoughts, advice, and support regarding my situation. I want to clear up a few things and provide some additional context, including my fiancé's perspective on why he didn't stop. To start, for those wondering about where the accident happened, since the rules around blinking yellow lights vary, it took place in Texas within the Dallas-Fort Worth area. That's all I'll share location-wise for privacy reasons. Next, a lot of people have asked whether my fiancé has shown remorse and how he's been supporting me since the accident. The answer is yes. He's been devastated. He has apologized to me multiple times. At the crash site, in the hospital, during rehab, and at home. He's also been having panic attacks himself as of lately, something that he's never experienced prior to the accident. There was one moment where he called me panicking because he couldn't find his truck keys and desperately wanted to come see me to make sure I'm doing okay. My mom had to drive over to calm him down and help. He also continued to visit me frequently in the hospital and at the rehab center, and he's been advocating for me when I had issues, such as the back brace I was given, which was clearly too large. Side note: despite multiple people from my family, fiancé, and even the PTs mentioning it, the hospital staff didn't replace it. It wasn't until I called the hospital a week later, frustrated, that they finally took action. I had to put on my Karen voice and explain that their failure to properly size the brace was actively hindering my recovery. Eventually, I got a new one in a smaller size. Fun fact, the brace only comes in two sizes, SM and L/XL. I'll let you guess which one they gave me. My fiancé has also been helping me understand the insurance claim process. From what we know, I may be looking at around $100,000. Additionally, at home, he's made sure I have what I need to recover. He just bought me a $300 plus bed frame that moves up and down similarly to the hospital beds I was used to because I can't move up and down normally without feeling pain or being at risk of re-breaking something. He's also been cooking for me and for my visiting family, helping me clean up, assisting with daily tasks, and has made it clear he doesn't expect me to lift a finger and only wants me to focus on healing. He's even told me how he's going to halt his plans on expanding his side business so that he can spend more time tending to me during my recovery. With this said, I've seen a lot of comments saying I should leave him or even sue him, calling him arrogant or careless. I understand those reactions, but looking back, I would have to admit that this was an honest mistake that anyone could make at any time of the day. A bad mistake, yes, but nonetheless simple human error at the end of the day. I'm just angry that it's happened to me, but that is something I will have to work through on my own. With the "I don't know" reply that he had given me a week earlier, I will admit that he may have been still experiencing shock or trauma, and his mind seemed to have been drawing a blank when I had asked him, because I asked him the same question again today. "Why didn't you stop when I told you to?" He told me he thought the gap between us and the oncoming car was big enough to make it. He didn't realize how close it actually was. He also said he didn't hear me say stop until it was too late, at which point we were already hit. I told him I said it much earlier, and he admitted he just didn't hear me. He feels horrible. He's told me that every time he approaches a yellow light while driving now, he reminds himself of what happened and how stupid he feels for not being more careful that night. I'm not excusing what happened. It was traumatic. But I do believe he's learning from it and taking accountability for everything as best as he can. I'm just the angry, bitter one that is needing to work through my emotions and grief that I'm experiencing because of the accident. That said, I've resumed individual therapy weekly now instead of monthly, and I had my first session since the accident as of yesterday, and my fiancé and I will be attending couples counseling together. Yes, I plan on staying with him. I know a lot of you are coming from a place of concern and care, and I truly appreciate that. At the same time, I want to gently remind everyone that I'm a real person going through a very real and painful experience. What I shared was raw and vulnerable, not a call to be judged or attacked. It's okay to disagree with how I'm choosing to move forward, but please remember I'm the one living this day by day. Healing, both physical and emotional, isn't linear, and I'm doing the best I can. Thank you again for the overwhelming response. I'm reading as many comments as I can, even if I can't reply to everyone. Please continue to take care of yourselves and those you love. Hold anyone you care about closely to you, because when you least expect it, life can change in an instant. Now on to the next story. Story 13. Best friend was outed as trans by another friend. I defended him and it led to someone losing their job. I will try to make this as short as possible but have to explain a lot too, so here we go. My BFF Sam and I have been besties for over a decade, and thus, I have known him pre-transition. He didn't live in the city I did until about 4 years ago, but when he moved, I helped him get a job, make friends, etc. Some think he is my BF of a year. The truth is a bit more complicated. 2 years ago, I got out of a very abusive relationship, and when I was on the market, I got swarmed a bit with being asked out by casual acquaintances. Sam posed as my BF to get an especially pushy guy away from me at a bar we are both regulars at. And we kept it going because 1, he gets pressured by his coworkers and mentors that he is a catch and should date, but he hasn't felt ready. And 2, so I can have some peace as I focus on my therapy and healing from my past relationship. Note, our best friend group knows that Sam and I are not really a couple. Another guy like that was Mal, another friend in the group. He asked me out around 4 or 5 months after my breakup. I explained that I needed at least a 2 years break from dating, focus on continued therapy, working through my trauma, and take time to focus on me and what I wanted, all that jazz. He said he understood, and not even 2 months after that, we found out that Mal and another of the group were a couple, and now they are engaged. Mal has been a friend for maybe 3 or 4 years. We were never especially close, and I always just viewed him as a member of our 6-person friend group. We only ever hang out with a group and never one-on-one. I guess I am saying this all to say Mal is sort of the Flash to my Batman. We get on well when with the other super friends, but don't expect too many duo team-ups. At a party at my place where many of our coworkers and bosses were present, Sam's boss points to me and Sam saying something about how he can't wait for us to settle down and have kids, saying, "Come on, Sam, what are you waiting for, man?" And Mal snorts and clearly muttered, "Man," very incredulously and said, "Yeah, if you want to call Samantha man, that's on you." At first, our friends thought it was a supernatural joke, as a lot of us love the show. A character is named Sam, and another character calls him Samantha to emasculate him. But then Mal outed Sam as actually a woman and provided proof by way of pictures of Sam pre-transition. Mal then made comments about me that I must be a lesbian, I am, by the way, and that Sam and I must be actually a real couple and sleeping together. He was kicked out of my home. Now, being outed as a trans man at work caused a lot of drama, and Sam was depressed and has stayed with me for a better part of a month. He didn't eat much and lost a ton of weight. Almost never left the house, especially not alone, unless to go to work, and has been saying very self-loathing, morbid things here and there. I've been really worried about him. I won't lie, I was furious. I'm not an overly confrontational person and I'm a recovering doormat, but this made my whole being boil. I have been focused on being attentive to Sam and trying to channel my hot anger and hurt into productive things. But the friend group is a bit complicated, as most think Mal is a a-hole for outing Sam, but some also think Sam is a jerk for not being honest with them. So here's where I'm probably in the wrong. I texted Mal and Mal's fiancée, our mutual friend in the group, Michaela, and said that Mal isn't welcome at my home for the foreseeable future, and after that is really up to Mal's action and Sam's ability to forgive such things. But she defended him, saying that Mal was just upset that Sam hid that he was really a trans all along and now felt uncomfortable, and that Sam should have said something at least to our group before joining outings like swimming, in which the men change in the men's locker room and the women in the women's, etc. She says she feels hurt that another woman saw Mal undressing. and it devolved from there. In this group, we all work in the same type of industry but in different departments essentially and mostly different companies. We're always a bit adjacent to one another in career though. That is all to say, everyone here usually makes at least good money and we all know each other's coworkers and the like. I got a call from another friend, Peter, who is hiring right now for a senior position and he said Mal had applied for it. Peter is essentially already above Mal as Peter is the boss of Mal's current boss. Mal had put me down as a reference which in our group we do frequently when applying. Peter was content to use the same letter of recommendation I had sent before when Mal applied for his current position, but wanted to cover all the bases. And I told him that I no longer see Mal as an ethical, responsible, or suitable candidate in our field given that he seems to be bigoted towards queer folks and I as a queer woman no longer trust him and would not want to work with him if I had any say in it. Peter was quiet and asked what caused the change. And I didn't tell him, just saying recent events have caused me to reassess. This was perhaps a week ago. Well, a few hours ago, Michaela came over my place. She told me that Mal is getting grilled at work, that HR combed his social media and has brought up posts of his and are now considering disciplinary actions with him. And she says she knows it's me. She says Sam literally doesn't have the balls to call the company, so it had to be me. She seemed to think I had a crush on Mal and he turned me down. And thus, I was jealous of her and trying to ruin their lives. She called me desperate and degenerate. I snapped and asked her to leave. She then texts me the same argument she had before and I reiterated over text that I don't want to speak to her or Mal ever again. I screenshotted all of this and sent it to our friend group chat and left the chat. Now I'm getting messaged from almost everyone asking what's happening, but also that I'm going nuclear and went too far. I texted Sam and Sam says he is not ready to deal with the friend group right now, so I can do what I think is right and he will regroup and come back to it when he has the bandwidth. Did I go too far in involving everyone? Am I the a-hole for going nuclear? Update. August 10th, 2024. A little under a month ago I posted about an ongoing issue. My best friend Sam was outed as a transman publicly by our former mutual friend Mal. Mal applied for a job before all this and used us as references and I said that I don't find him to be trustworthy nor would I want to work with him. His fiancée, another friend of ours, frankly, forgot the fake name I gave her. I think it's Michaela. Basically, she blamed me for Mal then getting a lot of heat at work. The update is that they combed his social media and uncovered quite a few unsavory posts. I never knew this, but he's hugely vocally transphobic and homophobic. So instead of a promotion, he got fired. I had already left the friend group chat by this point and I had blocked both Mal and Michaela. I was focused on Sam, who was going through the deepest depression I've ever seen him go through, and we've known each other a good chunk of our lives. I helped him find emergency therapy and he stayed with me for almost a month because he was concerned he would fall back into self-harm. He drank heavily and was spiraling hard. And thankfully, he's now on the other side of it all, but it was terrifying. Neither of us got a lot of sleep during this time and I called in a bunch at work out of exhaustion, concern, or plain numbness. I caught up with a friend from our old group named D.F.30s at a place we all frequent a few couple ago, and she told me Mal has told everyone that Sam is a woman early, and she cosplays as a man. My blood boiled, but then I heard about him being fired and hey, I'm human and EF him. He hurt my best friend, so in my book, he got off really easy. But of course, about a week after that, I ran into him and Michaela at our local, redacted. I am a creature of habit. That's the store in my community and I always get groceries on Sundays. Walk across to the Starbucks next door, have a tea and doom scroll for a bit before biking back home. I saw them, they saw me. I avoided them, got my shit, and walked to Starbucks. Mal, I guess, had stuff to get off his chest, so he ended up there too. He approached me as I waited for my coffee and started on how I stabbed him in the back and stooped low to do so, and now he has no job. He said he might have to move because of the rumors I spread about him and that he is being ostracized. He went on, belly aching, and this is a Starbucks in a pretty liberal freaking city, so I just loudly said, "Well, that's what happens to transphobes, Mal. No one likes a bigot. Go away." And while he started in on whatever the hell he was saying, I couldn't hear over the bigoted shit he was saying. This big dude walks over and tells him to EF off. Mal is now telling this guy off and they are tennis balling insults. until Maul aggressively points a finger in my face to the tune of a racist slur. I know, like, dude, at least use a shovel to dig yourself deeper. Christ. Leave enough hate for the other half-smoked, wet lettuce joint losers out there. Turns out being a racist trumps being a homophobic ass in a beanery, because that's when people started shouting, and eventually he was just drowned out, surrounded by people who seemed to be in need of pitchforks, some holding their phones up to record. I was a forgotten prop and just sort of drifted back as he was trying to take on a sea of people from our city where we don't take kindly to this shit. He left and later sent Sam a paragraphs-long message about how he, Sam, ruined his Maul's life because he is masquerading as a man, and if he were a real man, he would face him himself rather than have his beach sicked on him. He then went on to say that if he dies from all the stress of being so hated, that he is now getting trolled on social media, receiving death threats and the like, it will be Sam's fault. Maul said he should sue Sam and me both for defamation and lost wages since we started this witch hunt. Today I heard he moved. Sam's Michaela. She's still here. I don't know about her situation right now and don't rightly care. I do know she met with Sam and apologized to him, and he did accept it, but was clear that their friendship is non-existent now. She offered to go to Pride, which is locally happening, and Sam said she is welcome to, but not with him. She asked him to please hand me a note she wrote for me, which he did, but I haven't read it and probably won't. As far as I am concerned, she doesn't exist anymore. So that's it. I had forgotten about my post until Sam asked me, whatever happened about it? And I was like, oh yeah, and I personally as a lurker hate unresolved stories. So here it is. Here's your bow. That's a wrap. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.